Hi guys, my name is Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and I'm a never Trump Republican, and I like breaking down the politics du jour. After a morning segment in which Steven Bonnell II, aka Destiny, made me mad because he made a spicy joke in reference to a natural disaster that actually killed people, we're going to go ahead and watch his breakdown with Decoding the Gurus. I think it's going to be an interview style thing that's going to poke into his politics and his psychology and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be chilling here probably for the next couple of hours and breaking it down every few minutes or so. Go ahead and like the stream and watch the VODs and comment down below for the comment gods and all that kind of stuff. And without further ado, let's go.
Hello and welcome to Decoding the Gurus, the podcast where a psychologist and an anthropologist listen to the greatest minds the world has to offer, and we try to understand what they're
by implication, is Steven one of the greatest minds of the world?
talking about. I'm Matt Brown, the co-host is Chris Kavanagh, and this is a special Right to Reply episode, isn't it, Chris? Who have we got with us today?
We have with us one Steven Bonnell, also known as Destiny, who we recently covered and invoked the secret right to reply rights. So thank you for coming on, Steven, and staying up late, which was appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Am I on? Am I in?
You're on and you're in.
Okay.
So typically the way this works, though, to be fair, it's only been invoked about 3 or 4 times, because every time we cover people, they're not usually the type of people that respond well to being covered. So, but there technically is a format where we allow people to raise any points of dispute or issues, or anything we got wrong, or just questions or that kind of thing. And then afterwards move on to more discussion and questions that came up from the stuff that we covered or elsewhere. And in your case, we did get a lot of feedback. You may not know it, but you're quite a controversial figure on people have opinions.
Great.
So,
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah, I've heard this recently. I'm curious, for the people that refuse to exercise their right of reply, and I imagine there's people that obviously take issue with a lot of the coverage you give them, what's their number one reason, or what are the most common reasons you hear them say for why they don't want to come on and chat about it?
Well, the biggest reason they don't come on is frankly because we're not important enough. That would be the biggest reason.
That's the most important factor. The second one is that a lot of the people we cover identify anybody that is given even mild critical pushback as bad faith actors, right? Mm-hmm. So in that case, if they do acknowledge it, it is usually just to say that we are not worth their time, or an example of the kind of people that people shouldn't listen to. So that tends to be the reality.
We're still warming up, so I'm just going to address a couple of chats. PS Work says, I heard 40K where? Type in Counterpoints 40K into your search bar. You'll find my breakdown content. Effectively, I take all of the animations and cinematics that are currently available in the Warhammer universe. I watch 5 minutes. I cut out 30 to 40% of the original product. I stop every 5 minutes, and I explain everything that's going on. Especially new people and some veterans who don't really care that much about the lore have found my content quite helpful. So type in Counterpoints 40K and check it out.
Action, but there has been exceptions. Sam Harris has taken up his right to reply twice with varying degrees of success. And we had Chris Williamson, who you chatted with back in the day. Yeah, gotcha. That was more successful.
Sam Harris is my final boss guy that I really want to chat with. I would be more excited to chat with him than Joe Rogan. I really want to. Hopefully someday it'll happen, but
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. I heard you on the stream talking about this issue when you're debating people about that you raise a question or ask people something and they monologue or they waffle on and on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just saying, that might be something to think about if you do end up talking to Sam. So
sure.
Okay. But how about you, Steven? We got the feedback from your feedback that the reception was generally positive, but maybe you got a few bones to pick or a few points of explanation to make, or...
I'm going to be honest, having somebody cover me and not call me a pedophile Nazi for 2 hours is actually, the bar is in hell. So if the coverage isn't that, I'm actually incredibly grateful. So
All right. That's funny. That's funny. Pausing just to break up the content and also because I parasocially love you and want to read your chats. Crayon says, Valor Media Network, will you cover the Epstein no list memes? Yeah, let me cover it real quick. Jeffrey Epstein, very likely, in my opinion, bear in mind this is just my opinion and opinions are like butts, everybody has them and they oftentimes stink, is that Jeffrey Epstein learned from Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, Robert Maxwell, who worked for the United Kingdom, Israel, and Russia, doing intel operations for all three countries. He was basically a double or triple agent. Learned how to do honeypot schemes. And so Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein trolled through South Florida, recruiting teenage girls to be masseurs for exorbitant rates, and then recruited them as underage prostitutes, some of them allegedly being as young as 13. Then he would party with incredibly rich and influential people in the country, like Alan Dershowitz, Donald Trump. There's pictures of him with Elon Musk, but I don't know if Elon Musk partied with him. Bill Clinton for sure has been to Lolita Island and probably had sex with underage prostitutes. And so as a result, vast amounts of our government was compromised and our secrets were likely sold to the CIA for leverage and also sold to the Israeli Mossad for leverage. And the reason why it's not coming out is because not only would this hurt people that you want to hurt, like Donald Trump, it would also hurt people that Democrats don't want to hurt, like the Clintons. Because imagine that Bill Clinton, one of the most popular Democratic presidents of the past 50 years, loved on a level similar to Obama, was accused of participating in a child sex trafficking ring that then involved like murder and cover-ups, right? Now, I do think Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, but who cares what I think? Point being that the Trump admin promised that they were going to offer transparency, and they're not. And so my inference from this, call me conspiratorial if you want, is that everything that I suspect about the Jeffrey Epstein files is probably true. It was probably psychological operations. It was probably related to gathering intel and honeypots in order to give Mossad and CIA leverage over current American politicians. And the reason, and Bill Gates, by the way. And the reason why it's not coming out is because it would be too damaging to the public consciousness. There will be people like me and people involved in politics who will constantly crow about it. I guarantee you that 60% of normies, 70% of normies in the American public, they barely know who Jeffrey Epstein is. That's my take.
I feel like when and I say all of this cautiously because for all I know, if I dig deeper into your guys' stuff, you're just as problematic as everybody else, which maybe you get the impression when you dig into other people. It's hard to get people to make serious considerations, I feel, of other people's ideas. So for instance, if somebody says like, oh my God, we need to kill these fucking people, blah, blah, blah. Somebody will say that and somebody will come away with that and be like, oh, he just wants to murder all people. Instead of like looking at, okay, well, when he says kill all landlords, like what's actually going on here? You know, like the statement itself can be problematic, but there might be something underneath that we need to consider as well. And yeah, I just find when most people are considering stuff of mine, I've probably done, I don't know if it'd be an exaggeration to say I've probably done more broadcasted content than almost anybody in existence, just by virtue of like how unique streaming is and the fact that I've been doing it for about as long as anybody has been. It's easy to like clip 20-second statements and then have this insane caricature of me that you attack, even if there might be stuff that is worthy to criticize, like the actual criticism just ends up being insane, I think. Yeah.
I guess part of that too is that you come from that gamer type background and this internet subcultures and so on. And, you know, the way you choose to express yourself is pretty colorful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like that's definitely a thing. One of the challenges of being a popular person on the internet is extracting valid criticism from demented online talk. So if a bunch of people are saying like an insanely mean, hurtful, not true thing about you, even if that criticism seems like bullshit, it's coming from somewhere, and it behooves you, if you want to survive in this arena, or at least adapt so that people can understand you better, to figure out like where it comes from. I think that when people criticize me for, obviously I use colorful language, or I can get unhinged at times. I definitely
Yep.
admit that. However, like the same types of strategies I believe are used to character assassinate basically anybody, right? So like on the other spectrum from me, you could compare me to say Biden. Biden doesn't generally make unhinged, crazy statements, but my God, every single time I talk to a conservative about Biden, they're telling me about like, remember the speech that he gave in front of the all red background when he said that half of Americans were racist and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if I look at the speech, he's like, he tries to qualify so much where he's like, not all Republicans are MAGA people. Not all Republicans deny the election, but that doesn't matter. They still like assassinate on like the one or two lines. So yeah, I definitely don't do myself any favors, but I don't know substantively or significantly if the criticism against me would change if I hadn't made certain statements. That's just my feeling, but yeah, I could be wrong.
Like you say, you've been doing this a long time, right? So you know the kind of statements I imagine that are like going to be clipped. I mean, like recently you intentionally said things, right, so that they would like about the Jewish shekels being paid to you, right, for your commentary. So like,
yeah, if you think that's a spicy Steven take, then you haven't been paying attention. Although that is funny. So he was saying on his trip to Israel when he went to do interviews and hang out and check out the West Bank and all that kind of stuff. He was saying that he said it very deadpan that he was getting paid by the Israeli state in order to do so. The fact that these guys think that's spicy is borderline cute in this part of the internet. Matt says, how many hours a week are you working between both channels? I spend about 5 hours a week on the Warhammer channel. I basically research, script, and shoot. And then I spend 25 hours a week on this one live, and I probably spend another 5 to 10 hours doing back-end stuff for the Valor Media Network. And then I would say that I'm about to increase my workload by another 10 hours per week. I've already dedicated my Sundays to doing that. And the reason why is because I'm taking the Counterpoints 40K formula and I'm expanding it to Counterpoint Sci-Fi and Counterpoint Star Wars. They're effectively clones of my 40K channel. But Sci-Fi is obviously going to cover all sci-fi movies, and then Star Wars is going to cover Star Wars. Fashion 40 says, by the way, I feel the vengeance I desire is at another level. Fashion 40 was saying that his lib sensibilities were punched out of him by 3 20-year-olds who jumped him, and he actually feels like law enforcement is a justified thing, because when you get jumped by 3 20-year-olds, ideally there would be a man with a gun, taser, and pepper spray less than 2 minutes away, so we can make sure that those 3 20-year-olds don't actually kill you. Now, the practice of that idea is far from ideal, but it should still exist. Eric Dom says, do you have a subreddit? Asking because I think the community building would help get that 80 to 100%. I know that yourself. Eric Dom, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, DM me on Twitter. Right now, most of our community engagement is in Discord, but I feel like Discord is a closed community. And so as a result, it doesn't grow as quickly and it doesn't have a lot of cross-pollination. It feels like Discord bros hang out with Discord bros. Whereas I think what happens with subreddits is when you're talking about a topic, not only can people from the community kind of engage with whatever's going on, they can also have people who come in and cross-pollinate into other communities. So I do want to get a Reddit going. I don't know my butt from my elbow in reference to a Reddit. Sean Kaplan says, gotcha. Feels like likelihood a father or mother of a dead child saw this is relatively high, which pisses me off. Yeah, sure. Steven's a total fucking asshole in reference to his tweet. And if people are going to call him an asshole, I hope he expects that. PS Work says, I'm pretty sad at what happened to the Young Turks. Yeah, they kind of lost their minds. Sorry if you're progressive. That probably is a big hit. Sacred Snow says, good morning all. Had a big meeting today, so I'm a little late. Hope everyone had a good weekend. We did. So Gen X says, I never heard of Decoding the Gurus. Should I have? No. This is probably my last chat before we get back into it. Decoding the Gurus is an anthropologist and a psychologist who are breaking down the great brains of the day, but they only have 21K subscribers. So I think they just started. I think the idea and the quality of their commentary is why they're able to get big names.
Yes, I get it, because you're basically trolling for the lowest common denominator response to show that they're not even trying to do things in good faith, right? Because you then immediately after will say it's a joke. But in the case where, like, the clip that we played, and we played the longer context of it, where you were talking about the situation in Palestine and Israel before the conflict, and you made the throwaway line about, at this stage, I think we should just genocide the Palestinians, or not we, but like they should, and then you went on to talk about the actual situation and say, well, honestly, there's no solution, right? And I get your point that the fact that it's obvious if you listen to the rest of it, that you're not calling for a genocide, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you saying that, or in general, kind of layering in those hyperbolic or extreme statements, doesn't that make it like easy for people to do? And like,
people are saying that there's a more recent episode. This is from a year ago. So I think I screwed up because somebody suggested the most recent episode. So where is it? Where is it? Sam Harris, A Field Spotter's Guide. Oh, is this it? Guys, this is terrible marketing. That's why you only got 21K views. You don't even have Steven in the thumbnail. All right, they were just doing the intro anyway, so I'm gonna click on the most recent one. That's, guys, Decoding the Guru, please DM me. This thumbnail is crazy. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward 5 minutes, just so we can skip the intro. So my bad. I didn't realize there was a more recent episode. That thumbnail is terrible.
Technicalities of whatever it is they're discussing, they all of a sudden like have nothing to back them up. This usually happens when you ask for an example or an explanation of an underlying thing. So we call this the lazy gardener, and I hate this. I hate it.
Why is it called the lazy gardener? Just out of curiosity.
Well, what good is a gardener if they're not willing to get into the weeds? Wouldn't that be a reason to hire a gardener? Yeah.
So just a point of order, we're going to see probably lots of connections and doubling up between the things that we're mentioning. So I'm just going to mention that my number 5 on my list is, that there's some connections with the thing you're describing. I called it decorative scholarship. And, this is something we see, which is kind of.
Possum Nation says, Connor, 120 viewers. How is Valor Media Network still demonetized? It's not. Go ahead and do the super chats or become a YouTube member now.
Heavy name, citation, technical term dropping, mentioning, alluding to a bunch of things and hinting that there's a great deal of depth there. But, they don't go into it, right? Because it's purely there. It's being mentioned purely for decorative purposes. It does the things that you're describing there, Destiny. But I think what it also does is it suggests this sort of deep learning, this deep scholarship, this deep awareness of all of this information that simply isn't there. They've usually got a pretty superficial understanding of it, and it's really just serving those decorative purposes.
I want to hear who he's referring to for decorative purposes. So this title is A Field Spotter's Guide to Guru Rhetoric, and this is being descriptive about certain characters. In the thumbnail, don't worry, we're at 7 minutes. There's Konstantin Kisin, Brett and Eric Weinstein, and Jordan Peterson on this thing. And so I want to see who they're talking about specifically. Now, for Brett Weinstein, I'll admit, over the past 5 years, he has been one of the most disappointing anti-SJW pundits out there, because effectively he started as this like progressive contrarian who was breaking with the heterodoxy of whatever was going on. But once you get past there, it doesn't seem like there's much substance besides contrarianism. Konstantin Kisin, I also don't view as like a particularly deep person. Jordan Peterson and Eric Weinstein, though, I can steel man them all day. So I'm actually very curious about who they're going to name.
Decorative purposes. It does the things that you're describing there, Destiny, but I think what it's really just serving those decorative purposes. My example here, currently researching Peter Thiel, because we're going to cover him next.
Ooh, I agree with that. Peter Thiel is an interesting character, but he doesn't have a lot of at least in the interview that I watched with Ross Douthat, he didn't have a lot. Once you got past to let's disrupt the current, government and thought processes and orthodox ways of thinking, it didn't seem like he had a lot to offer under that. I need to research Peter Thiel more, but yeah, I agree that that's the way that he was speaking for sure.
And he frequently references a philosopher, Stanford philosopher called René Girard. And he's a Foucault-style Jungian philosopher who I think is pretty useless and obscure in any case. But, Peter can use that to leverage the kind of credibility that's there. But in truth, it's a bit like Jung. It's kind of bullshit, but it's deep. But
oh, fuck yourself. All right. I'm not going to like this guy, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll fight in a minute. I'm going to let him give us some information before I got pissed.
But he just zeroes in on the dumbest and most superficial idea that this philosopher's got, which is that apocalyptic predictions in the Old Testament are going to be predictive of some present day apocalyptic risks and are somehow useful for understanding AI and nuclear war and so on. So he's basically saying Old Testament prophecies are real.
All right. I'm gonna try to steel man this, which is actually really frustrating that somebody this intelligent doesn't understand what's going there. And now, bear in mind, there could be literalist cringe mixed in, but since Peter Thiel is an atheist, I don't think that that's what is going to happen. So if you study the Bible, which I understand half of you are heathen pagan freaks, so you're already switching your brains off. If you study the Bible, there are predictors for when a civilization is going to go through turmoil. And those predictors oftentimes have to do with corruption, unresponsiveness of the government, social and cultural and technological stagnation, like an amassing of enemies. There's all these like biblical sociological things that happen to the state of Israel and to Rome before they fall. And so as a result, studying those predictive things that happen before a society collapses is actually probably pretty good. Now, believing that they're one-to-one predictive is obviously cringe, but saying that there's nothing worth studying there, I find dismissive and stupid. Melody says, Connor, what are your thoughts on Econoboy coming out as socialist? I feel like all my issues with him have now been made more clear. No, I agree with you completely. One of my frustrations with Econoboy in our conversation on Live and Learn, and also with on Live and Learn, and also on Tim Pool, was that he was like, here's all these descriptive things. And I was like, yeah, I agree with 70% of your descriptive things. And then he was like, therefore socialism. And I was like, we're missing a few variables here. Fucking Econoboy.
Totally superficial and stupid idea, but by doing that kind of name dropping and superficial engagement with this sort of hinting at this background literature, it comes off as pseudo-profound.
There's a double standard in play whenever people are doing the kind of Lizzie Gardner approach, where often people want to cite specific examples, but in the way that Matt's talking about, like a performative, decorative thing. So like you recently, Stephen, were talking to a MAGA guy, and he wanted to reference that there were like FBI or CIA informants in the crowd, right? And because of a report that made, well, he wanted to say agents in the crowd, but you pointed out, no, the report was talking about informants, which is a very different thing. And then that was presented as, oh, this is a, wordplay technicality. So it's like using, like citing things so it gives the impression that you have like this knowledge, you've read the reports, you've got into the weeds. But if you're pushed on it, you then present it as like, well, this is just, you're focusing on like a semantic issue that doesn't really, matter to the bigger point. So you kind of get to do it both ways. You can either present your opponent as like an unrelenting pedant, but you, on the other hand, are able to just like constantly make reference to things that give the impression of depth. So there's a concept in psychology called pseudo-profound bullshit. And it's
number one, fuck you guys for calling me out like this. Number two, this is 80% of alternative media, guys. I'm not going to lie. Most of the most popular alt media pundits are not reading books. They're not reading studies. They're reading half a dozen to a dozen news articles, and they're giving their hip shot takes on it. So Candace Owens, 100% hip shots all day. Tucker Carlson, hip shots all day. Lex Friedman, hip shots all day. He says he reads like 6 books a week or whatever. I'm calling bullshit on that. And And yeah, so I would say a substantive amount of people, Tim Pool, I would say is probably another person where they have an ideology, they have a base, they have an approximation of where they want to be politically or socially or culturally, and then they just analyze current events or other alt media personalities through that lens, and then they repeat that ad nauseum. I try to be a thoughtful person. And when my surface level analysis is challenged, I try to admit where I don't know enough, and then I try to shore that up with research. I'm not good. I'm similar to all these other assholes, but at least I admit it.
It's normally referring to like stuff like Deepak Chopra, saying things that actually don't really mean anything, but sound mystical and kind of.
I don't like that either. Deepak Chopra does do pseudoscientific, mystical bullshit, but if you actually read religious texts, there's things that he references that are actually interesting.
Like they're philosophically deep, and this just seems to work really well in the podcast space as well. Like if you're good with words, if you're good at speaking and referencing research and whatnot, then you just sound like convincing. And like Matt said, the decorative scholarship thing is, if you're an academic, and like there's bad academics as well, there's blowhard academics and all sorts of types in academia, but you can usually tell the difference between someone name dropping to look like very smart versus when this is actually a relevant, like source to provide to illustrate like a point more clearly. So yeah, those two things to me seem like overlapping.
I have one, I guess I can't use this now. It's called show, don't tell. If you've truly read some material.
Interesting that they're making it into chapters. That's cool.
And you've understood the material, you shouldn't have to rely on the other person having read the material for them to understand what you're saying. Anytime you are having a conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, you need to read this to understand, and that's it, and you can't explain it, then there's literally no point in you ever bringing it up because you did not read the material. I never believe so.
True. Jazz hands in chat. If you can't explain an idea simplistically, then fuck you, is what I say. So sorry for the profanity. But one of the things that pisses me off, I actually don't think about this guy a lot, but you can blame Jeb Tan, who is a creator in the Twitch and YouTube political space, for why I'm bringing this up. Is there's this guy named Admiral Gibbs, and I used to bump into him on Prime Kai panels, and I used to bump into him with Rob Knorr, and I used to bump into him on Wick and all that kind of stuff. And this dude is a fucking idiot. I can't phrase it any other way. And he's got a hate boner for me. And to be honest, since I kind of stopped participating with him and I blocked him on Twitter, I really don't think about him that much. But he'll say a sentence, and the sentence will be, all the Democrats are leftist Marxists who are destroying America through mass immigration. And then you're like, okay, what does Marxism, because Marxism in my idea is it's a economic and material analysis of the world, and it often states that like communism is the ideal endpoint for material humanity, so a moneyless, stateless, classless society. And then when it comes to communism, that's the same definition, right? Moneyless, stateless, classless society. And then socialism is the precursor to it. So I say, what do you mean by Marxism? Well, like what about mass immigration in the 21st century and 20th century Americas is Marxist? And you could do an explanation there. You could say that it's actually a plan in order to get the working classes of the world, the materially deprived, into America, so their grievances can be used as political leverage against the American imperial capitalist machine. And so as a result, not only will you accelerate statelessness, but you will accelerate the class struggle between the global South and the American empire, and therefore communism will be ushered in faster. If you understood Marxism, or if you understood the definition of communism, then you could make that argument. And I ask him to make that argument, or any argument whatsoever. But instead he says, fuck you, I'm not playing your definition game. And it's like, you're nowhere in debate should it be viewed as a debate tactic to define what you mean by words. That's just how conversation works. And so if somebody is not able to summarize their ideas at all, they should be viewed as an idiot. And if they're not able to summarize their ideas quickly, they're probably less of an idiot, but still an idiot.
Somebody when they say they've read multiple books on a topic and they throw out a couple authors or a couple book titles, but
they don't know shit.
Can't elaborate on any of the material beyond a quote that they've memorized. That is a
true. Like I quote Clausewitz all the time. I haven't read Clausewitz.
Huge red flag. And anybody that is like an example of somebody saying like, oh, well, this is why Descartes said that. Okay. But like, that doesn't mean anything. But if you're able to say like, oh,
no. I disagree with this part. The Clausewitz quote I do use is war is diplomacy by other means. If you actually understand that concept, then it makes all of geopolitics infinitely more understandable. So I don't agree with that part of it.
Oh, this is why some philosophers, some studies said this, and it was interesting because in this, they talked about this particular phenomenon that's well understood here, and they were able to demonstrate that in this study, and that's why this is so interesting. It shows that you've read some important piece of material, that you can reference it appropriately, that you've like assimilated it into your thoughts and into the body of knowledge you have that has allowed you to arrive at some conclusion, and then you're using it to kind of like demonstrate that. It should be furthering an argument. Yeah, I call this show don't tell. Anytime somebody immediately says like, oh, well, I'm educated in this realm, that should be like a precursor to demonstrating your level of knowledge. If you have to tell me that you're educated in some particular field, it sounds like you're doing a really bad job at communicating your education because you have to bring that up as like a source of authority. I could never imagine having an argument in like music where I have to like appeal to like, well, I would discover this, blah, blah, blah. Like I would just explain the thing because I learned the thing,
Yeah, there's two examples that come to mind of that recently. It's like there was Lex in the interview with Zelensky at the, the framing at the end, referencing he'd read 30 books. He's consumed all these and talking about how he's critical.
Yeah, but you don't understand shit about it. Yeah, that's where I would challenge, who is it? My dad likes him, Lex Friedman. I would challenge Lex Friedman because with Lex Friedman, he's like, I've read 30 books. And you're like, okay, can you explain them? And he's like, no.
Appraise them and whatnot.
I've read countless books about this war.
Oh my God, I didn't know we were going to get an edit.
And the long arc of history that led up to it. I've read Kindle or audiobook about 10 books fully. And then I skimmed about 20 more. And I don't mean books about Zelensky, although he does appear in some of them. I mean books where this conversation was fully in the back of my mind as I'm reading the book.
But in the interview.
I didn't know they were going to clip it in. That's awesome.
Showing extreme naivety about like the historical and current situation in Ukraine, right? Like, bringing up elections and like kind of repeating fairly bog standard talking.
He sounded like a guy from Twitter. I didn't hear a single question or thought that goes like my knowledge is extensively greater in everything having to do with Russia and Ukraine. And I've read exactly 0 books on Russia and Ukraine. So there's no way that he's read a
That's awesome.
Single one. I don't believe he's read a single one or 10 or 30. There's just no way that he couldn't have asked about any other agreements besides what Zelensky brought up, allude to any facts of the history. Like, yeah, I don't understand what was the necessary education for a single question that was asked here. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, people do this all the time. It's actually crazy.
Yeah, you're talking about dropping citations for purely performative reasons and not substantive ones. Jordan Peterson is another example.
Hey, fuck you. Don't talk shit about my dad.
He likes to mention that he's read, was it hundreds, Chris?
200 books
200 books on climate change. Why not?
Okay. He has a reading list. And by the way, this is actually what's going to piss me off a little bit. Jordan Peterson reading list. And he also talks about the books extensively. Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, 1984, George Orwell, Road to Wigan Pier, George Orwell, Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, Demons, Dostoevsky, Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche, Ordinary Men, Browning, The Painted Bird, The Rape of Nanking, Gulag Archipelago, Man's Search for Meaning, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Maps of Meaning, History of Religious Ideas, Affectionate Neuroscience. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that these are just like, I've heard him reference the fact that he has like 100 book reading list or a 200 book reading list. But already I can tell you that not only can he reference 1984 and Brave New World, he can articulate the themes behind the books. I know that he actually has a passionate analysis about Crime and Punishment. I know that Ordinary Men, I learned of Ordinary Men through either Jordan Peterson or Jordan Peterson or his Orbit. I know Beyond Good and Evil, he says, is necessary pre-reading before you read anything by Jung, Modern Man in Search of a Soul or Hero of a Thousand Faces. So no, this isn't decorative. In my opinion, they're misusing this concept. They can dislike Jordan Peterson, but disagreement is not the same as incorrectness. So for instance, like Steven and I disagree about Men in Black. Okay. I have a media analysis that is reinforced by evidence that I think is explicitly or implicitly made by the artwork itself and is also reinforced by the director. However, Steven has a line of argumentation where he's using psychology and subtext and plot devices and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm going to say, based off of the evidence, that I am more likely to be correct. But that does not mean that Steven doesn't have an articulable line of argumentation that is capable of being, I think they call it like valid and sound. Valid is where the logic is good, and sound, I think, is where the logic is good and it's true. Steven could still have a valid line of argumentation. So just dismissing somebody because you disagree with them because they have a valid line of argumentation, but you don't believe it's sound, is an incredible way to miss important information. I actually think they're being fairly dismissive, but that's okay. That's okay. Let's see if they have anything more substantive.
I spent quite a bit of time going through the relevant literature. I read about 200 books on ecological, what would you call it? I read maybe 200 books on ecological development and economic development, the relationship between the two. And
200 books.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Lex needs to think bigger. He's a...
Okay. Problem? Question mark?
Oh, he said he read 30.
Oh,
Now, ecological, I think the problem here, I will articulate the problem, is that he's saying that it's specifically ecological development. The way organisms modify their environment and the reciprocal influence of the environment on an organism's development. I would be surprised if he actually read 200 books on this topic specifically. He could have taken other books and then just kind of like rolled them in and been like, oh yeah, Dostoevsky. If you think about it, it's actually an ecological analysis of how human beings shape society and how society shapes human beings. So he could be using ecologically overly broad. And I would actually view that as like decent criticism. But if you look at this, like, look at this. This is an ecological framework. Individual, work, school, friends, family, neighbors, mesosystem, extended family, culture, political systems, social norms, macro system, economic system, and then chronosystem being time. This is like how individuals relate to society. So I think saying that sociological books that talk about like mythology are actually technically ecological analyses, I'm okay with that. You can say that's cringe. I think it's true. But that's okay.
maybe he should have read it more than just the Communist Manifesto for his debate against.
All right. Owned. Okay. I agree.
Zizek.
Zizek, remember that? He only read the fucking what an unbelievable fool. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I accept that. Now, technically, he didn't just read the Communist Manifesto. He also read Soviet propagandistic literature. He also read, Solzhenitsyn and all that kind of stuff. But you're right. Maybe he should have read more Marx and Engels and Mao. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, but you
guys are dicks.
You're right. I mean, sometimes there's a time and a place, and if you're going to bring something up, then you do it in order to use it in a substantive way to illustrate what you're talking about. I mean, I was just trying to think of an example, and I thought of one of my own, because there was this guy, what's his name? I forget his name, but he came up with this idea of luxury beliefs.
Oh, Rob Henderson.
Rob Henderson, right? It's kind of politically valence. It's like an anti-woke thing, right? But there is a core to it, which is pretty good. But the thing is, he basically has recycled it, taken it consciously or not, from quite an old psychology paper from the 1980s called Beliefs Are Like Possessions. And I won't reprise it now, but when I bring that up, you can. It takes about 20 or 30 seconds. You can explain the fundamental idea in rough sketch of that idea in that paper, and show how this luxury beliefs thing is just a variant and a more specific type of that. So it can be done. So that's a substantive citing versus performative citing. Okay, good one. I think we've doubled up a little bit, but great minds think alike. Chris, it's your turn.
One of the things that we see a lot in the gurus that we cover is this use of strategic disclaimers. And this often happens whenever they're presenting themselves, like you were just talking about, that they have this expertise and scientific knowledge. So they'll slip in terms, or they'll add like caveats. And it's like Jordan Peterson or Brett Weinstein discussing, the possibility that hospitals might have harmed more people than they've helped now. They're not saying that's true, but the fact that there's, statistics that point to that.
I suspect if you did these statistics properly, I suspect that medicine, independent of public health, kills more people than it saves.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
I suspect if you factor in phenomena like the development of superbugs in hospitals, for example, that overall the net consequence of hospitals is negative. Now that's just a guess, but it could easily be wrong, but it also could not be wrong. And that is a good example, that's where my thinking about what we don't know has taken me with regards to the critique of what we do.
Yes, I think this is probably stupid. The reason why it's stupid is because you would have to have a 3000 IQ gigabrain in order to try to wrap your head around it. And so, as an example, let's talk about like viral epidemiological research. So the Wuhan lab, and a lot of people use this term, I forget what it is, but they talk about how the Wuhan lab and labs in Ukraine and labs all over the world or whatever are effectively studying virality. They study how diseases infect humans and other creatures and how they spread. And the hope is that not only can we see disease trends by studying these diseases, but also we can make like predictive public health choices that save lives. And overall, that's probably like noble work. I think torturing beagle dogs is particularly repulsive and should be a practice that's stopped. But overall, like epidemiological research is probably something necessary. However, let's say that instead of releasing coronavirus, they had released something that had the virality of coronavirus, but had the physical effects of Ebola. Because Ebola is actually quite deadly. I think even with supportive care, it'll still kill like a third of the people it infects. And the numbers get worse if you don't have supportive care. I think if you don't have supportive care, the death toll or the death rate can be around like 80% or 90%. So could it be that through the mass use of antibiotics, this is something that scientists actually talk about credibly, is that through the mass use of antibiotics, we might be creating antibiotic resistant diseases that will ultimately infect the population and kill vast swaths of the human race. And so at that point, you're going to have to take the math of the people who are killed by the antibiotic resistant disease versus all of the disease prevented and the deaths prevented by antibiotic treatment. And the truth is, the numbers might be closer than what is comfortable. So that's what he's pointing to. I think it's kind of dumb to assume that that is the case, considering how often hospitals are in operation. So I think it's kind of like a dumb analysis, but it points to something serious.
The fact that it's even plausible is a stunning.
I wouldn't say plausible. I would say possible and worth analyzing.
Well, you know, medical error is the third leading cause of death.
Then, you know, Brett will respond saying, you know, he's advancing conspiracy hypotheses, not theories. And this is just the way that science progresses.
We are not.
Sure. I'm okay with, let's see how stupid Brett gets, because Brett has said some wildly stupid shit. But pointing out that it is possible that hospitals, through creating antibiotic resistant diseases, might kill more people than it saves is kind of stupid. But is it worth researching? Absolutely. Because you need to have these like broad systemic analyses. Now, Brett is probably about to say something stupid that's going to make me eat some crow here in a second, but I'm going to read a super chat first. Grassroots Hegemon for 5, and thank you for your membership donations yesterday. Says the amount Sargon confidently talks about the Aristotle when he hasn't read the Nicomachean Ethics makes me want to end it all. Yep. And I haven't read the Nicomachean Ethics either, but guess what? I have them right here. The 11 virtues of Aristotle: courage, temperance, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, ambition, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty, righteous indignation. And what I would say is that I know that there are vices where you don't have these virtues, you have these virtues too little, and you have these virtues too much. And I also know that at least one or two of these are not translated directly into modern English correctly. Like one of these exclusively has to do with sex. It could be temperance. Temperance, when I think about it, I relate it to like alcohol and drugs. But temperance, I think, in the Nicomachean Ethics is exclusively about sex, where people who are like prudish or asexual, that's viewed as like a kind of vice. And then people who are hedonistic, STD spreading, degenerate, sex having freaks, that's a different version of sex. So yeah. So I know I am as guilty of Sargon of not reading the Nicomachean Ethics, but I'm also not so stupid as to pretend that I understand these concepts wholly. I just reference them because I think it's a good starting point. And I hope that you read the Nicomachean Ethics.
Going to advance conspiracy theories. We will advance conspiracy hypotheses.
They can spend 20 or 30 minutes waffling on about a subject, about like Peterson did with you actually when you were discussing excess deaths, right? And COVID. And then when you said to him, oh, so you're like, but you're suggesting the vaccines cause the deaths, right? That's what is the clear inference from what you're saying. But he said, well, no, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying I know, I'm just saying we need to look into it. But he, in any other sentence, he can kind of switch between the strong version of the claim where it's very clear. He's suggesting the vaccines are more dangerous than the illness. And then if pushed, he'll retreat back to, well, I said, I'm not claiming that I know that. And Brett, Weinstein, and others will do the same thing where they'll go on this big, long conspiracy. Like he suggested that the October 7th attacks were potentially like a kind of psyop by Goliath, this like, hidden force to cause disagreements amongst the COVID dissidents, right? Because they were getting too powerful.
There's something that I would call the coalition slicer dicer working.
Yeah, Brett needs to stop smoking pot. Like honestly, whenever he talks, I just hear like a 50 or 60-year-old smoking pot, and he thinks he's a little bit smarter than he is. And by the way, Brett and Eric Weinstein are intelligent people. I just think that they have Dunning-Kruger where they think they're smarter than they are.
On us. And what it does, let's say that you have a group of people who have found each other and they have come to understand how to interact with each other, and they have established bonds of trust over their growing sense-making surrounding COVID. right? You have the COVID dissidents who are realizing that they're all seeing pieces of the puzzle, and then they pool those pieces and they say, oh my God, here's what the larger puzzle looks like. And they are empowered and they hold meetings and they become an important force on the landscape, because as the population wakes up to the fact that something was done to it that was unholy, these people have all been seen to offer pieces of the truth along the way. That is a very powerful force.
God, I hate that. Oh. Okay. Why was I born? Just to suffer? Okay, Brett is a Pacific Northwest pothead. Okay, he taught at a progressive lefty college for a prolonged period, and then a bunch of progressives with baseball bats were running around in the parking lot trying to bash his head in because he protested the fact that white people, I think he's Jewish, but white people were asked to stay home from school for one day to show solidarity with people of color. And Brett, as a Jew who thinks that that's creepy and weird, didn't stay home. And then a bunch of progressive students started being like, let's bash the fash, even though they're talking about bashing a slightly different lefty. Right? That's Brett Weinstein's origins into social media, as far as I understand. When he first went on Joe Rogan, he talked about effectively like a nonprofit, volunteer-based think tank that him and a bunch of other really smart people got into that were trying to revolutionize the way that people perceive government and culture so they can create the next great steps of humanity. And he talked about that passionately and earnestly. Since his explosion into anti-SJW pop culture phenomena, I have not heard about that project anywhere near as much. But it's unsurprising to me that he is trying to create a heterodox movement of internet schizophrenics who are skeptical about the vaccine program, who are then going to revolutionize the world's understanding of the government, because effectively that's been his project the entire time. And I think that Brett, if he's not doing marijuana, then he is like 2 steps away from a schizophrenic and psychotic break. And if he is doing marijuana, he needs to stop. That's my evaluation of Brett Weinstein.
That force is fiercely divided over the interpretation of what took place on October 7th in Israel. And this has...
Kill me now. What did he just say? What did he just say? Brett, what the fuck did you just say?
That force is fiercely divided over the interpretation of what took place on October 7th.
Maybe because they're internet schizophrenics constantly looking for conspiracy theory and you're indulging them? Is that why? Is that why they're fiercely divided? Is that why they think that Israel planned the intentional slaughter of 1,200 of its own citizens as a casus belli in order to invade Gaza and the West Bank? Holy shit, I hate this. Okay. All right. These guys, okay. Some of this is very well deserved criticism. Some of the criticism leveraged by Steven and these guys is very well deserved. I hate to admit it, but it's true.
In Israel. And this has impacts across the globe. It has impacts on the U.S. presidential election. It has impacts on our understanding of U.S. entanglements abroad generally. And my concern is,
Old School says Peterson has also said ecological developments and how it interacts with economics. I don't know if that's a criticism or if that's a steelman of Jordan Peterson, Old School, but I would say that the analysis of communism and its like sociological effects from Solzhenitsyn, it would be partially economic, right? Because we're talking about the competition between socialist and communist and capitalist theories.
Divide and conquer is a famously ancient strategy. Mm-hmm. My guess is we would find the formulation of it in many different traditions. Obviously, Napoleon knew about it.
This is happening says that's a wild stretch to change what ecology means. I agree. And I think Jordan Peterson deserves criticism if that's what he did.
But surely Sun Tzu is going to have things to say about it. But divide and conquer in an information landscape might look very much like an ongoing slicer-dicer operation that simply tears coalitions apart so that they are never capable of making any meaningful change, which is, after all, I think the
Sorry, I need to hear that again.
Might look very much like an ongoing slicer-dicer operation that simply tears coalitions apart so that they are never capable of making any meaningful change, which is, after all, I think the Goliath's purpose.
It's a very
Everybody has conspiracy theories whenever free people freak out and break apart in a coalition. But the truth is that freedom and having the capacity to have multiple perspectives on a topic is one of our rights and privileges living in a free society. And the truth is that people are just going to fucking disagree. Like, I'm sure that psychological operations and social media exist to try to fracture our understanding of the world. I'm sure there's intentional operators who are pushing hyperbolic narratives in order to intentionally fracture the American zeitgeist. But it's also just the product of a free society.
very silly conspiracy theory, a very narcissistic one as well, right? But he can then say, no, I'm not saying that's the case, but I've just noticed a lot of things that, you know, don't line up. And it's not like they wouldn't do that kind of thing. And then if his fans are pushed on it, they'll say, well, he didn't say, right, that he was actually doing that. So this, like, dropping
Sorry, I'm still half listening to the content, but this is an awesome comment. Sacred Snow says, I suspect you should stay in your lane, JBP, instead of attaching your plot to pseudoscience guesses. Yes, sure, but this is funny. Wowman542 says, I've read 200 Batman comics, so let me tell you why democracy is cringe and monarchy is based. So, wow, man, I read the first half of that sentence and I immediately had like a flashbang schizophrenic break. Technically, hold on, let me pull this up because you guys can make fun of Jordan. You have my permission to make fun of Jordan Peterson for him stretching every book he's ever read as an ecological analysis. So this is funny because if you read 200 Batman comics, are you not studying the individual in relation to friends, family, neighbors, school, and work? Are you not studying Batman, Bruce Wayne's interactions with parents and friends, local governments, mass media, and extended family? Are you not talking about his impact with political systems, culture, social norms, and economic systems? So, if you've read 200 Batman comics, indeed, are you not as much as an ecological analyzer as Jordan Peterson? Are you not just as well read? That's fucking awesome. That's good. That's good. If you've read 200 comic books, you know as much about ecological development as Jordan Peterson does.
in of strategic disclaimers. And it kind of fits as well with the lack
Sorry. Christian Blair says gain of function. Thank you. That's the term that I missed.
of desire to discuss specific details, because you can say, well, you know, I don't know those actual details, but the overall point is valid. So, but I think this partly relates to people who are trying to present themselves as like scientific authorities, or like, you know, kind of.
LB says, why should we not experiment on beagles when you eat hamburgers? What's the difference? Cows are fucking retarded. And sorry, I used the R slur. Sorry, Ken. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Jesus. Sorry, Commander Haircut. Cows are dumb as shit, and they're large, and they exclusively transition grass into meat. So it seems like they almost serve the biological purpose of being prey of carnivore animals. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have some level of social intelligence or some level of kindness or gentleness in their stuff. So I actually would like to revolutionize the agricultural industry to be more humane, for the euthanasia of cows to be more humane. And I also wouldn't mind also like lab grown meat. When it comes to beagles, I just think dogs are some of the most socially intelligent creatures on the planet. So that's what it is. I don't like torturing socially intelligent creatures. I know pigs are also supposed to be pretty smart and emotionally intelligent, but pigs are also disgusting. Old School says, Connor, why are you so obsessed with IQ? It's a measurement no one can point to what it actually measures. Plus, it varies in an individual. It's useful in understanding INT, but it's not the end all. I never said it was the end all. What? And by the way, I don't even know what that has to do. What correlates with IQ? IQ, or intelligent quotient, is an estimate of intelligence and has been shown to correlate with a variety of factors, both genetic and environmental. Academic performance and professional attainment. Higher IQ in childhood is linked to better academic performance and future professional attainment. Training performance, openness to experience, brain structure, longevity, and income. So if there is a metric that correlates with income, longevity, brain structure, openness to experience, training performance, and academic performance and professional achievement, why wouldn't you be interested in that? What's your problem, bro? Why don't you like IQ?
Guru-ish figures. So I don't know if it comes up as much in the kind of influencer space.
Yeah, definitely. So I have one, I think, that maps on a pretty clean list. I call it, my name for this is debate edging. And the description I have for this is when you constantly stack.
Oh, I like that we're moving into different concepts. I do like this.
Descriptive claims, one over another, that are clearly leading in a certain prescriptive direction, but you never actually verbalize that prescription, causing other people to attack you on a prescriptive claim that you've never made, allowing you to refute their arguments without addressing the obvious implications of what you're saying.
Tucker Carlson does this all the time. Candace Owens. I'm repeating their names. So God forbid, not God forbid, God please allow dissident right-wing people to please see this segment. They are so guilty of this. It's infuriating. Tucker Carlson never makes, well, not never, but he rarely makes prescriptive claims about the state of Israel or the deep state or whatever. He just does a bunch of arguments by implication. Same thing with Candace Owens. I think it's an intentional strategy on their part where Lauren Southern is guilty of this too. Lauren Southern is wildly guilty of this. Who was the other person who did that? Fuck, I hate him. I hate him so much. What's his name? The Distributist. The Distributist does this shit all the time. In the way that you can call these people out, which I have done so. I did it to Lauren. I did it to Distributist. I don't have the ability to do this to Candace Owens, but if I could, I would. And I don't have the ability to do this to Tucker Carlson. But you ask them to make prescriptions. You say, okay, you've given us half a dozen descriptive arguments that I disagree with. It sounds like you're implying X. Can you please make a prescriptive claim? And what every single one of these freaks do is they run away screaming from making any kind of prescriptive element. And I think they're all ideological cowards when it comes to that. Now, of course, when it comes to Lauren Southern back in her Ethnonat days, and when it comes to Distributist and Ethnonat days, publicly proclaiming ethno-nationalist, segregationist, race realist perspectives is going to get you banned from social media. So I understand why they're in their own self-interest, they're not making prescriptive claims, but I do view it as a form of intellectual cowardice. If you truly believe what you're saying, that we are in an existential crisis for the future of the white race, probably, then what's more important? Your ability to make a few $100,000 on YouTube, or alerting the white race of its imminent destruction? And that's where I view a lot of these people as like grifters as well, where they ultimately don't believe their own bullshit. Because if they believe their own bullshit, they would be acting in an existential crisis way, and they often don't. They just make tons of money, party with their friends, and hang out. You know, they do what everybody else is doing while race grifting. Anyways, I need to use your restroom. So I'm actually going to watch a part of this, and then I'm gonna go get some water. I have to leave soon, which is very unfortunate, but I want to see who they describe.
So somebody will say Peterson is relentless at this. Women are really bad in the workplace, and when they have makeup, they distract men. And the only reason...
Oh, that's a straw man, you fucking loser. I love you, Steve, but that's a fucking straw man.
Women go to work is because they want to sexually appeal to older men and find mates and blah, blah, blah. And you hear all of this, and all of the audience...
Everybody socializes because they want sexual access, but okay.
And you are all hearing like, geez, women need to not be in the workplace. But when you try to...
No, Jordan Peterson would never say that women didn't need to be in the workplace. That total fucking straw man.
Attack them on that. It's like a phantom prescription. You're like, so you're saying women shouldn't work? Like, well, I've never said that at all. And then all those fans say, oh, I've never said that at all. He didn't. That's right. He didn't say that. You're totally attacking him for no reason. Kathy.
Nah, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. The whole point, the whole point that Jordan Peterson was making wasn't that women don't need to work. It's that and by the way, people made fun of him so much for this fucking take. He was saying that the rules of the sexual marketplace are totally in flux right now, which they are. They're totally in flux. This was before Me Too. Give me 1 second. My fucking dog, who I love, has been scratching at the door for 5 minutes. Fuck. I love my dogs. I love them a lot, but I swear to God, I need a doggy door inside my house. Thank you, baby. I'm supposed to be done in 30 minutes, right? 1 and 2. Oh, I have more time then. Okay. Can I go until 1? No, 12:30. Okay, got it. Love you. Anyways. So this was before Me Too. And so what was going on was that there were behaviors that were being labeled as toxic that had been common for the past 100 years, which is effectively, there's 2 or 3 places where you spend your time. 8 hours per day, ideally, you're asleep. 8 hours per day, you're at work. And then if this dog scratches at the door, I'm going to freak the fuck out. Oh my God. Give me a second. Yes, can I help you? Oh my God. I'm going to kill these dogs. I love them. I love them so much, but I'm going to kill them. Sit down and shut up. Now. Thank you. As I was saying, over the past 100 years, it was generally accepted that men and women would socialize and fraternize in the workplace and socialize and fraternize after work because you spend 8 hours a day at work and you spend 8 hours a day at home. And then the rest of the time, you're probably getting ready for work or getting ready for home or you're doing domestic responsibilities. And so there was a very high chance that you would meet your partner by socializing and fraternizing at work and also socializing and fraternizing with work friends immediately after work. Well, what happened in the past 2 decades is because men were wildly inappropriate and they did shit like constantly hit on women or make gross sexual jokes or, continue to harass women in order to go on dates with them after they'd already said no, is we've developed HR culture. And HR culture is human resources, where effectively what they've done is they said, anytime you make any kind of sexual suggestion for liability purposes, people can complain about you to somebody who has the power to fire you. And this has chilled the social fraternization between the sexes and the genders. Now, truth be told, I think if you're socially astute and pretty smart, then you can know when somebody is interested in partying with you, with fraternizing with you, with going out for drinks, with having fun. You can typically figure that out if you're like a pretty socially intelligent person. And so as a result, like most normies are still able to chat up people at work without getting in trouble with HR. But it's also chilled the sexual interactions that were common, 10, 20 years ago. So to strawman that as, well, we're in flux because of the pre-Me Too sexual environment, and we are in flux because of HR, arguing that Jordan Peterson was saying that women shouldn't work at all, I feel is fucking insane. And I'm surprised that Destiny used that as an example.
Is it Kathy Newman, or am I making that name up?
Kathy Newman, yeah, she's the
when
reporter.
she did
World-renowned GeoHound says, I cannot understand your affinity for these idiots like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson isn't an idiot. Like world-renowned GeoHound, no offense. I think you've been hanging out with fucking idiots who think Jordan Peterson is an idiot. They are literally malicious, deceptive, bad actors that push propaganda and use propaganda tactics. Fuck them. Nope. Disagree. Massive disagree. I think I think you've been hanging out with people who don't understand Jordan Peterson.
Hated him. That was a trap that she kept falling into over and over again, because she was trying to attack what were the obvious implications, and the implications that all of his fans believe, but he never actually makes the prescriptive claim. And so it's very difficult. You have to ask him, like, well, what should we do? Although he'll always say, well, I don't know. He'll always say that, even though the whole audience has already been led there. There's a big like catch. There's a big heuristic, or a klaxon should blare in your mind when this happens. When somebody is constantly doing that, but it only ever goes in one direction, and they never provide the counter, that should be a huge indicator that they are bullshitting you, right? There are times when I'm not an expert on anything, and I'll guess. I'm like, I don't know. I don't actually know the science on like this particular thing. It could be that trans people are better at sports, or that trans people are worse at sports. But if somebody says that, and then they don't give the other side, right? Like, it could be that trans people have a huge advantage. I'm not sure. But it could also be that like the percentage of people that go into sports is so low, and that these people are likely to transition earlier, and maybe the type, whatever. Like, if you don't even give the other side, but you only give one side, and you are always caveating to always argue in just one side, then it's
LB. College kids do crazy college shit. Okay. Walking around in a parking lot with baseball bats looking for your fucking professor so you can beat the shit out of them is not lol college kids doing crazy shit. That's called aggravated assault in the state of Florida. If you're carrying a weapon and you find someone and you say, I'm going to beat the fuck out of you within an inch of your life, that's a felony. As a cop, I'll take you to prison. And a judge might look at you and be like, oh, you're a cute college kid. You'll get, 6 months suspended sentence. Okay. Yeah, that happens. You know what happens to hood rats who do that repeatedly? They go to jail for like 5 to 10 years at a time. So don't, LB, you fucking, I love you, but you piss me off so much consistently. And I know that's entertaining for chat. So I invite you to keep coming back to piss me off. But no. Walking around in a parking lot with a fucking baseball bat looking for your professor is fucking psycho unhinged bullshit. And anybody with an IQ higher than fucking 70 should know that that's dumb and can result in a severe prison sentence. Imagine if they actually did find him and beat the fuck out of him. If they did beat the shit out of somebody with a baseball bat, that's aggravated battery. That's like 3 to 5 years, depending on the damage they do. They could have gone to prison for a very long time.
bullshit. The caveat isn't there to responsibly tailor the message. The caveat is there so that you never have to defend the obvious conclusion.
Yes. And I think like
No. Okay. We're gonna look at women. Okay. We're gonna be sexist. Women's professional attire. Images. Okay. High heels. Lift your legs. And they make your butt look better. Okay? There is no reason that women should wear high heels besides making their butt look better. Okay? That's a sexual signal. Having clothing that emphasizes your hips is also a sexual signal. Now, this is very moderate dress, so I'm not trying to criticize these people, but I'm saying that these are subconscious sexual signals. Okay? Then same thing with, let's go, here we go, with things that emphasize the chesticles. Okay? The reason why you emphasize your chesticles is because you want people to look at your chesticles. Okay? Then this thing too, this like half, staring right into the camera while having your mouth, slightly open, et cetera, et cetera. This is like a subconscious sexual signal as well, where you're looking at something directly and then the mouth partially open is supposed to be like a symbol of desire, right? That's what it is. And then there's a line of argumentation as well that when it comes to male professional attire, clothing, that the suit jacket will sometimes have padding or it will be very tight in the shoulders, and the emphasis is on the shoulders because male sexual signaling often has to do with emphasizing a high shoulder to width ratio, which corresponds with testosterone, by the way. And then also, there's not so much like an emphasis on the penis, I guess, because penises are not that attractive. But the truth is that suits are designed for men in order to obscure like belly fat, which could be like a sign of unhealthiness, and to maximize shoulders. So these are subconscious sexual signals that we have put into our clothing because we're trying to communicate attractability to whoever we're trying to attract. If you're gay, then you're trying to attract men. And if you're women, then, and if you're straight, you're trying to attract women. And then if you're a woman, same thing, right? And so the point that people even bother denying that there's subconscious sexual signals related to makeup and clothing is fucking absurd to me. Like it's so obvious because the other option, by the way, Saudi Arabian clothing, this is another option that we can do. We can just wear amorphous clothing. And you know why Saudis wear this? It's not because they don't have sex. Saudi people clearly have sex. But the reason why they wear this clothing is because it's hot as shit. That's why they wear this clothing. If they had an option to wear something that emphasizes their shoulders, which by the way, this guy's like cloak emphasizes his shoulders, then they will put that into their style of dress. And then it's the same thing with women. The reason why the burqa exists is because, or the, what do they call it? It's not just the burqa. Burqa clothing. The reason why this outfit exists is explicitly in Islam is to reduce the amount of sexual appeal that women can have in public, because they view that as like a woman's attractiveness, her beauty should only be for her husband. And so they would look at this and call her a whore. That's the point of what, well, not all of them, right? You know, like Saudis or Persians or whatever, they would actually be like, oh, that's actually quite fetching. That's actually beautiful, right? But women who dress like this would call this woman a whore because she's showing off her face. Her breasts are enhanced by her dress. You can see her hips very clearly. Same thing with this, right? Like Frogan, for instance. She has, no offense to her, she's a hijabi, right? But that a lot of Muslims would view this as a provocative pose. And some of them might even criticize this as immodest dress. Okay. So anyways, the whole point of this, that was like a 5-minute, 10-minute rant. But the whole point that Jordan Peterson was making is that he didn't even know Me Too was coming, because I'm pretty sure this was before Me Too. He was saying that HR culture is disrupting the way that men and women operate in the workplace. We don't know fully what the rules are. And as a result, we're having all these negative social interactions. It's fucking true. And fuck you for not understanding that. Grassroots for $20. Thank you for your donation. The Weinstein brothers have the worst case of undeserved main character syndrome I've ever witnessed. True. Although I did learn about the narrative of Passover from Eric Weinstein, and I actually really appreciated him breaking down the themes of Passover. Anyways, back to the content.
Like, this is not exactly that, but it does apply that Hassan interviewed, we covered it on the podcast, the interview with the Houthi pirate guy, right? And it was framed initially very much like, we are talking to this guy because he's involved with this movement.
Bro, are we about to have a Houthi rebel on stream? Yes, brother. What do you mean? Excuse me. Of course I'm about to have a... I'm a journalist, okay? This is journalism.
But then...
So hold on. Old school asked an important question. Did Brett Weinstein actually call October 7th a false flag op? If he did, fuck him. No, that's not what he did. What he was saying is that the false flag narrative, which appeals to skepticism, is being inflamed by bad actors who are taking multiple perspectives on October 7th in order to break the skeptic community.
After getting like pushback on it, it was he's just a young guy from Yemeni. Like he said, you know, that he's not.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if he's a Houthi or not personally. Like, he didn't say any of that shit. He just said he's a teenager in Yemen.
And then at the same time, there's the argument that the US hasn't prescribed the Houthis at that time as a terrorist organization. So there's like these layers.
Yeah, there's like 7 different arguments that all overlap.
Of like kind of retreating from the argument. But like if you watch the initial framing, like the interview that we did, it's very clear it's being presented that we are interviewing this guy who the media is demonizing because he, you know, is giving us an insight into the Houthis' perspective. But then it's just like, no, I just talked to.
I'm catching up with chat's reaction to me doing the Batman analysis, and Wowman542 says JBP's next lecture, the Jungian meaning of Power Girl's boob window outfit. Oh fuck. NY Northman says they were talking about Jordan Peterson concept regarding climate change, not a speciality of physics and whatnot. For sure. If Jordan Peterson exaggerated the amount of books he's actually read about the environment and ecology, then that's very cringe. Oh. LB, if you hate dogs, that's on you. I'm not going to explain it to you. Okay. Adonic Treadmill says, good morning, guys. This is one of my favorite throwback vids. I shouldn't be awake, but my kitchen staff are helpless children. I'm sorry, brother. Grassroots says pigs are dope. Pigs are dope. They're just also nasty, disgusting, dirty fucking creatures. Yeah, General So says, he's saying as long as you craft dogs into a delicious, dumb, ugly form, then it's fine, relatively speaking.
A Yemen guy about like Luffy and hamburgers. Like other people said he's a pirate, and he mentioned like talking to the captives and all that kind of thing.
Does he know what has happened to any of the crews? Like, I heard they tried cat, having a good time. Are they okay?
He's saying they've all tried caught, including the captain of the ship.
Oh yeah, Hassan Piker Frogan, Noah Sampson, and Mike from PA. I've seen them all be guilty of debate edging or point edging, 100%.
That he went on. He's saying that the vibes are immaculate.
No fucking way.
Grassroots says, if you've ever seen a newborn piglet, it will actually melt your soul. Sure. And I try to minimally eat pigs. Number 1, because they're dirty. Number 2, because they're dirty. Number 3, because the babies are cute. Number 4, because I know they're socially intelligent animals.
He's saying that they win over the crews on these ships, and they like win them over with their charm, and they make them hate America and the US government.
That's so funny.
But that's other people layering things in. So you can have it both ways, that you're doing the controversial thing, but then you're kind of like, I'm not doing that. And it's kind of like mutually contradictory. But it seems to work. Like you throw like loads of disclaimers and people can just pick the one that suits like the situation.
Yeah. I mean, this is something we see also in the tweeting from these influencers, where they don't actually say the thing, but what they do is they profess like the.
This is why I like being a conservatarian, centrist, liberal, whatever the fuck you want to call me. Is because you can just say your worldview, because your worldview is the norm. The worldview, relatively speaking, is don't be a racist fucking asshole. The norm is mixed economy capitalism is actually probably better than socialism and communism. The norm is that liberal democracy is preferable to fascism and authoritarian communism. So I actually I'm a huge fan of being normal.
Commenting on the wildfires or some major events, and they're saying that they're very confused. They don't understand.
Yeah, Christian Blair says Connor needs to write these down. These would actually be more shit to argue about than Men in Black. Yeah, sure. I'll write these down, actually.
And things aren't adding up, but they highly suspect that. And everything about it is leading their followers to make the obvious conclusion. So you can read the replies, and all the replies are like, yeah. Oh my God, the government's covering up the UFOs. The DEI caused the Wi-Fi. You name it, right? The obvious conclusion is clearly seen by all of their followers, but they never said it. They just they just expressed confusion in trying to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. And it's funny because intuitively we all know what's happening because like, I'll just do this to other people, right? I used to hang out with you in LA and I know you lived before. Isn't it weird that you've always lived?
Okay. AKA Batasui says Jordan was saying that women in the workforce were depressed and in the wrong place, but he was talking about the fringes. Not okay. Yes. However, what he was also describing is the fact that women pursue these like high level careers like lawyers and shit, and then they don't find purpose in it in the long term, similar to how men often have existential crises when they're workaholics. And so what he was saying is that part of his practice was encouraging women and giving them psychological tools in order to succeed in the workplace, but also telling them to prioritize things that actually make them content and happy. And that the whole goal of feminism should not be to turn women into dysfunctional workaholic men. And so he wasn't saying women shouldn't be in the workforce. He was saying that women should prioritize things like family and community and well-being and connection and all that kind of shit, which is true of not just women, but also of men. And he acknowledges that whenever he talks about the fucking topic. So Short Stack Goblin says Connor simping for JP doesn't let him see the truth. Fuck off. I love you too, Short Stack Goblin, but fuck you. I've consumed and understand more JBP content than all you fucking DGG fucking rock throwing dickheads ever will. Sacred Snow says, I know why Connor will only tell us a few handpicked stories from his family. He knows we'll find out JBP is his dad if he tells more. No, JBP is my internet dad. JBP is my internet dad.
So like within like 2 months.
Connor's Michael's Vic is coming out. No, it's not. I will never defend dogfighting ever.
Miles of a grade school. Like, isn't that just kind of like as soon as you say that, everybody's like, wait, what the fuck do you mean? Like, wow, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying it's kind of weird, Like that's it. And it's like everybody knows intuitively, everybody understands intuitively what's happening. But this fucking thing drives me insane when people do this.
Just asking questions.
On the subject of just asking questions, I've got a close to home example I think applies, and we'll see if you agree or not. So I was listening to the Bridges podcast that you did with Dr. K, right? And we did a 3-part series on Dr. K.
Okay.
And I understand as well in that context that, that podcast is not really.
Grassroots says, dude, your dog scratches at your door. Hobbs has literally dragged a deer he killed into my house when I was in a suit going to meet a customer. The puppies are fine. Lol. Yeah, but they don't stop because my dogs are spoiled. So they don't stop scratching.
Like a challenging debate format, right? It's more a discussion. So there are probably things that you would, might push back in other occasions. But nonetheless, so I was listening to it, and I'm more critical of Dr. K, it's fair to say, but he mentioned that like his coaching program, right, which he's very clear in all our contexts is not therapy. And he mentioned that
lol, obviously it's therapy.
They have looked at their internal metrics and it gets better.
Melody, that's incorrect. So Connor says the argument is Peterson never gives a description for a solution. He just leads you down the route of maybe an issue, but never goes further. So you can't attack him or the thought. I'm calling bullshit. When it comes to solutions, you could literally just look at all the 12 rules for life shit. Those are all exclusively solutions on how human beings, men and women, should orient themselves for life. When it comes to chaos and order and putting your life into order, when it comes to being temperate and patient and letting people explore and become bigger people, he has prescriptions out the ass when it comes to psychology. When it comes to sociological questions like, should women participate in the workforce? He doesn't like the presumption that everybody knows the rules. And that conversation, by the way,
results.
Let's go ahead and take a look and make sure that my chronology is correct. Jordan Peterson, Vice interview, women in the workplace. 7 years ago. That was 2018. When was the Me Too movement? Well, the original is 2006. 2017 was the beginning. So this was exactly correlative with Me Too. So you can't tell me that everybody knows the rules of workplace sexual dynamics and everybody is happy with it and knows exactly how to conduct themselves, considering that Jordan Peterson did this interview talking about secondary sex characteristics being emphasized and de-emphasized in the workplace, and male-female relationships being confusing for modern people, when literally what happened was Me Too. And then, since then, 2017 through 2022, the entire fucking sociological complaint since then has been men no longer interact with women because they're too scared to do anything, but because they're afraid of being accused of being predators. Which, by the way, the real answer to that is men just need to stop being pussies. But at the same time, like, that's something that I hear consistently, is that young men are scared to socially engage with women for fear of being accused of being creepy, both in the workplace and suffering workplace consequences, and also being blasted on social media. Yeah. So I disagree. Red Supreme says, JBP is an atheist Christian who can't come out and just say that. Well, Red Sparrow, I'm going to take out some heat that I have for a commenter against you as well. So my apologies before I say fuck you. I'm still going to say fuck you, though. Somebody in comments said, like, oh, Connor's just an atheist. He just doesn't, he just hasn't accepted yet. Fuck you. Okay. And the reason why is because religion is obviously pointing to the creative and ordered force of the universe. And that's consistently what it talks about when it comes to the creator God of the universe. And when it comes to the pagan gods of ancient times, they're talking about external forces outside of humanity, like war, rage, passion, art, beauty, etc. And these concepts are more eternal than the species itself. There are probably aliens who have some conception of war or anger or vengeance, because even if they don't use the same words, they understand the concept, and therefore the concept is eternal and outside of humanity. That's what the pagan gods refer to. And so a whole bunch of mythological bullshit gets thrown on top of that, no doubt. 90 to 95% of religion is either metaphor, mythological, parables, history, all that shit, right? But to say that I or Jordan don't believe at the underlying truth that is being pointed out by religion, I'm just going to succinctly say, politely, because I love you for being a chatter and hanging out here and making a comment, I'm going to politely say to you and to the two other commenters, fuck you. So, love you, but fuck you. Hoach says, Jordan may not be an idiot, but he does a damn fine job of convincing people otherwise. Fuck my chat today, okay? Seriously, you guys are pissing me off.
Therapy, and he mentioned, like, they can't release it, it's based on confidential metrics, but he's had conversations with the American Psychiatric Association, and he was kind of horrified by how bad their outcomes were. Right now, he also added in, then, now they have a clinical subpopulation, so there's other things, right, that make that different. But when I heard that, I was like, right, but you've added in the disclaimers, but what you've also implied is, like, that your coaching program is as effective, if not much more effective, than most other forms of therapy. But you've also added in, that's not what you're claiming. So, like, if I raise the critique, people will say, oh, but he said, they're dealing with subclinical populations, so we can't really compare the outcomes. But the very strong, like, implication you get, and from the surrounding conversation with Kyla, where you're talking about, the lack of kind of quality control within American therapy session, is,
I hate you guys. I love you, but I hate you. Sten Franklin says, Jordan Peterson can't just be an idiot, but he is either a sophisticated or a terrible communicator, which should be disqualifying for a public intellectual. Wrong. If you have an IQ over 100, he's actually quite easy to understand. which all of you guys understand Jordan Peterson because you all have 3,000 IQs. Everyone is fucking brilliant here, so you all understand exactly what he's saying when he says it. You just need to watch the content. Instead of watching Destiny describe the content or watching people who dislike religion describe the content, just go watch the original content. It's actually quite dry. Like when you watch the some of my favorite Jordan Peterson stuff, I think it's at Harvard. It might be Toronto or whatever. But Jordan Peterson Harvard lecture. Yeah, it's not going to be Harvard. College lecture. University lecture. Anything with this background where he has like cinder block and he's walking around is fucking fire. Okay. There's 20 minutes of dry bullshit. And then he'll just say something where you're like, oh, fuck. And it'll like reorient the way that you think about the world. So don't listen to Steven describe Jordan Peterson. Don't listen to Vice News describe Jordan Peterson. Don't listen to anybody else talk about what he talks about. Just listen to him. And if you have a higher than 100 IQ, you'll understand perfectly what he's saying. He's verbose. He's dry. He's a college lecturer. Okay? But some of this stuff is actually straight fucking fire. Also, it makes for some pretty good memes. Like Jordan Peterson, the rat. Oh my God. I hope they have like a 1-minute clip. This rat is this. Rat is this. The rats are all like this. The rat goes like this. So the rat's like this. The normal rat is like this. That's the normal rat. Like this, like this. It sniffs. It's like this for quite a while. He's like this. And then maybe he sniffs. You are now a normal rat. Rat. And I don't think I've watched the specific one, but I've watched enough JBP to know that he's talking about like the fight or flight psychological conditioning of a lot of living creatures. I know that's what he's talking about. But there's just like random memes like that where he's like, if I was Hitler, this is what I would do. Sure, kill the Jews, wipe them out, whatever. It's this like Jordan Peterson out of context is actually straight fucking fire. I love Jordan Peterson out of context. Anyways, point is, shut the fuck up. You guys are pissing me off.
Their coaching system is,
and what I mean is, don't shut the fuck up. That way you can give me spicy comments that I interact with for the audience's entertainment. So go ahead and keep talking.
Is great and super effective and has much better quality control things, but you also get, you know, the disclaimer that I'm not making that claim. So do you think that counts?
I think it's a fair criticism. I feel like mental health and coaching stuff is really weird because it's one of those areas where...
Hold on. Gen X says, no wonder the legislators are such pervs, definitely our fault. No. You are insufficiently complex in your analysis, okay? And I do have to leave in a moment. Sending subconscious sexual signals is not bad. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to go full screen. We should continue to watch this, by the way. This is actually great content. I might unironically continue to watch this tomorrow, but I have to go to cousin camp, okay? So, Gen X. Me shaving my head, the reason why I know that I can shave my head is because I have a decent head shape. The reason why I grow my beard is because I can show you that I have masculine vitality, okay? There's plenty of men who can't grow a decent beard, and it's because they don't have sufficient testosterone in order to grow it. The reason why I work out, partially just because I want to look good, but the reason why I want to look good is because I want to emphasize my shoulders and my arms, and I want to show that I'm healthy and all that kind of stuff. Now, I have a wife, so I've already attracted my partner. So at this point, it's mostly just for health. But there's a decent way where people have a feedback mechanism within their psychology where they want to be viewed as attractive. So I'm not calling women sluts, which is also, by the way, the straw man of Jordan Peterson. I'm not calling them sluts for showing off secondary sexual characteristics. It's not slutty to want to be perceived as attractive and then have the opposite sex or the same sex if you're gay find you attractive so they interact with you so you can find your partner. It's not negative. It's not degenerate. It's not socially destructive to want to signify sexual health in order to attract a partner. That's pro-generative. That's pro-social. That's actually good in some ways. Where it jumps the shark is where you show off your secondary sexual characteristics to the extent that you're distracting from the environment. Gross, buddy. You're distracting from work by showing off your sex stuff, because then you're not clearly there for work and just happen to be looking for your partner. You're just trying to get laid, right? And so that's where it can be degenerate. It can be degenerate, but it's not necessarily degenerate. Okay. So without further ado, let's go.
Like therapy as a thing is like, there are strict medical definitions over like what counts as therapy and what doesn't. But then there's also the fact that like when it comes to friends, we all engage in behavior that's like similar-ish to therapy, depending on the type of conversation, but obviously doesn't carry the same medical things. So it's a hairy area. But I mean, I think that
this segment, by the way, just to catch people up, I think it's called debate edging. Yeah, debate edging. And it's where people make a series of descriptive claims that lead them up to a prescription, but then they never make the claimed prescription. I was actually fighting with chat quite a bit yesterday because we were arguing about Jordan Peterson, and I was defending Jordan Peterson's honor because I'm biased towards my internet dad. However, the person they're talking about now is Dr. K, because Dr. K says that he's not engaged in therapy, but he clearly engages in 10,000 different behaviors that seem similar to therapy, and then he just calls it something else.
it's fair. Like, I think it's pretty fair that anybody coming away from listening to Dr. K talk about his coaching stuff, it probably feels like it's being suggested as superior to therapy, or at the very least something to consider alongside therapy, or if therapy doesn't work for treating similar-ish stuff. I think it's fair to say. I
realize this will be like getting into the weeds on this specific thing, but I think you will find I'll condense it to this point. So like,
sorry. To be clear, I love getting in the weeds, so go for it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. So the like another example, which I think like lines up with another point that we might talk about, is like, so Mel Gibson was on with Rogan, right? And he said, ivermectin, he said a lot of things, but he also said ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, blue dye number 4 or something. Like, some of his friends took it. 4 of his friends that had stage 4 cancer, very unlucky person with so many stage 4 cancer around, and they all got better, right? They're all cured. And that is, they obviously don't want us to know about the treatments. And him and Rogan, talked about why these things are being suppressed and so on, right? And like, I think a lot of people listening, and maybe a lot of people in your audience would be like, well, that is somebody like making a very stupid claim and relying on anecdotal evidence to support it, right? And inferring there's like a nefarious they that are suppressing information. But on the conversation you have with Dr. K, so Dr. K mentioned him and his wife had a long COVID and cured it with Ayurvedic medicine. He added in a sentence where he was like, now some people will say reversion to the mean, but then he kind of talked about how, over time, meditation has been proven effective. Things that weren't considered science are now considered science. And he talked about how, we don't have scientific evidence yet, but actually there's a big literature in India around Ayurvedic medicine, that is dismissed by the scientific establishment. So to me, like, it's not a strong a claim, but it's the same like kind of framing whereby you're saying, I had a personal experience and this thing was treated with this, and the medical establishment doesn't want you to know, or they're dismissing this. In his case, he's saying it's because of ethnocentric, like Western.
Okay, they're getting into the weeds, so I want to tell you about this. So Melody says, Connor, don't forget to write down the names of the methods, whatever these things are referring to. Yeah, so I wrote these down, and if I got them wrong, I'm operating off of my memory from yesterday. So if I got one of these wrong, please tell me in chat. So the lazy gardener, if I remember correct from yesterday, is referring to things without understanding them. And what they did is they talked about how Jordan Peterson talks about having read 200 ecological books, or how Lex Friedman talked about how he's read dozens of books on the Ukrainian conflict. And so they can, the lazy gardener, if I was to try to think about the metaphor, it would be effectively a gardener taking credit for a garden that's doing well, but realistically the work he did was dog shit. And by the way, I live in Florida, so this is actually like very apt. I don't know if I'm using this correctly or even describing it correctly, but I'm operating off of my limited memory. And so you're referring to ideas and concepts by other people without fully understanding what's going on. That's the way I would summarize it quickly. Strategic disclaimers. I actually don't remember the segment, so I could have total early onset dementia. But strategic disclaimers, I would say like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens do this a lot, where they disavow and deny valid criticisms from their opponents before they start laying out the groundwork. So for instance, they'll say like, I'm not being anti-Semitic, but, and then they just go into 10,000 like anti-Semitic tropes, right? Then debate edging, like I said, is implying through description, but never prescribing. And then I would say there's also an element of retreat here. Whenever challenged, retreat. That is what I would say I think I have this one 100% correct. These two, I'm like 60 to 70% sure that I got these concepts correct. Sacred Snow says, we need to somehow pit Bad Empanada against President Sunday. God, they would destroy each other in the most glorious way possible. Indeed.
Like chauvinism, right? But to me, the logic is kind of the same, underlying it. Like take an anecdote, present Western model.
Shock Doctor says, Connor, the point I was more speaking to was the population that supports an authoritarian style government. What do you do with that group of people? You let them live in a free society and you force them to live in a free society. What do you want to do with them? You want to do the paradox of tolerance, and you want to kill the people who are intolerant? No, you just let them live in your liberal society and you tell them that they're wrong and stupid.
Medicine as like closed-minded, and then adding in the strategic claimers to me just gives you like more wiggle room, but doesn't really fundamentally change the logic.
Noonan Sar says Peterson is indefensible and is the ultimate debate edger. I'm going to debate edge you, bro.
Logic from like what Mel Gibson and Joe Rogan are doing.
Sure. So I don't want this to be a huge Dr. K defense and attack episode, okay? And I admit, obviously, I'm friendly with him.
This is the weeds. This is the weeds.
No, yeah, you're good. Yeah, I admit I'm friendly with him. So here are the reasons why, I don't want to say I'd give him a pass on this, but why I'm not like as critical as I would be with some people. I think there are a couple big things. So as soon as he's
BizD says, what's the segment about? It's about different guru techniques and tactics.
Said I don't want to misquote it. I don't think it was meditation. Something related to Ayurvedic stuff cured their long COVID, which I think is understood now to essentially be like chronic fatigue syndrome, I think, CFS. But whatever long COVID is.
Yeah, a lot of questions around it.
Whatever long COVID is, that was cured. So in my mind, obviously, I'm instantly thinking, correlation causation, time passes, you get over a thing, whatever you do possibly could have cured it. Although he does make that concession himself multiple times where he says like, it's possible that it got better and we're just, not seeing it. Now, obviously that could just be the caveat, right? That allows him to make the claim while avoiding owning it too much if he gets called out on it. The only reason why I give him a pass I shouldn't say give him a pass, but I won't push as hard is for two reasons. One is because he is willing to admit that a lot of the Eastern medicine stuff is total bullshit. He's willing to admit that they have serious epistemic problems with the way that they engage in research. So the criticisms are a bit more than just like we're racist. And I think he does admit some shortcomings. I think he accurately identifies some shortcomings of Western research or of like this concept of like scientism, where people get a little bit too attached to scientific processes for some things or are a little bit too blindly trusting in them without like auditing them to some extent, which I think can be valid criticism. Like I think those criticisms are better than what I normally hear, which is like big pharma doesn't want you to know the answer. Like I don't think I've heard him say something like that before. If he said that, I would be much more critical. But so I think generally his criticisms are pretty good, and generally his defenses are fairly caveated in a way that I find decently acceptable. But like I would be foolish to say that nobody ever listens to these and just bites, like a more extreme conclusion than I would say you probably should. So I'm understandable. I'm sympathetic to the complaints that he is like kind of like weaseling around these things. I guess if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think part of it's definitely whether or not it's a strategic disclaimer or a genuine disclaimer is kind of in the eye of the beholder. And there's a lot of context and previous history that goes into whether or not one judges it one way or the other. We should leave Dr. K, but the final thing I'll mention is it was very interesting to listen to his defense, because he was censored by the American Psychological Association or the Clinical.
I thought it was the Canadian one because I thought he was Canadian. But Vlad the Kebabber says, Connor, what do you think of Destiny Sun's political views? Do you watch the interview? I did watch the interview, and effectively, I watched like the first like 20 to 30 minutes, to be honest. I don't know if I would get into more of it, but effectively what it sounded like was that, and by the way, this is total projection, so I have no idea if this is true. And by the way, his name is Nathan. I'm not trying to dox him or anything. I just want to refer to him casually as who he is, because he's a young man. He's becoming a man. I think he's 15 or 16, right? But he's engaging in the public sphere on social media. And so as a result, when you engage on the public sphere in social media, you can be criticized. So I will try to give the most tepid criticism to Nathan ever. When it's from an outside perspective, it appears to me that Nathan was hanging out in DGG, which I already thought was a mistake, but that's okay. And he thought that DGG was too soy and not capable of contending with dissident right-wing arguments. So he created his own Discord where dissident right-wing freaks infiltrated it and started talking to him about the Holocaust and Christian nationalism and authoritarianism and fascism and this, that, the other. And because the dissident right-wing people who got into the Discord were more kind, funny, charismatic, civil, etc., he was like, okay, well, subconsciously, I think he was like, this will piss off my dad. And I agree descriptively with what they're saying. Therefore, I'm going to adopt this and piss everyone off. That's my read on it. I'm not saying that's a fair read. I'm saying that's my read on it.
Organization that administers things after the incident with the online streaming with the therapy that isn't therapy, with Recfall and the subsequent suicide.
General So, this is about a week old.
And so on. And his framing of that was absolutely masterful. Similarly with what you were describing in terms of him emphasizing, Indian medicine's got a lot of problems, traditional medicine isn't scientific enough, and so on. He really leaned into the criticism, embraced it, talked about he's always looking to improve. We're always looking to do things better, that we're exploring new areas of therapy and in an online world, so that there just isn't ground rules for this kind of thing. And eventually got to the point where he framed it as being censored was actually an incredibly positive result. Like it was actually, in every sense of the word, it was something that he was happy about, he was glad about, and in many ways kind of validated his entire approach. So, Chris and I tend to be cynical bastards. So we read that kind of thing. We read that kind of thing as self-serving, but I guess someone else could read it differently.
I'll just add, Destiny, just because you probably didn't see that video, that there was the official reprimand, right? Which is most therapists go through their whole life without receiving an official reprimand. It's a relatively, serious thing to receive, but it is not like removing your license, right? It is.
Yeah, I read the order, the reprimand order, and I think there's like an 80-page thing that accompanied it or whatever. Yeah,
I think that wasn't released publicly, but the summary was. But but in that case, he presented it that because they allowed him to continue on practicing, they essentially give him, as he described it, a complete clean bill of health for everything. And that's a remarkable way to frame like an official reprimand.
I'm going to fast forward because I don't care about this that much. Dr. K is probably the least interesting controversy on the internet to me. And the reason being, he's like an Indian psychotherapist or something. And he talks about Ayurvedic medicine, which is like a bunch of Indian voodoo and shit. And I don't care. I'm not going to lie. So if this is like 5 to 10 minutes before the next segment, I'm going to move to the next segment. So where is the next segment, guys? Here we go. Bad faith critics. Dude, another 10 minutes? All right, I'm going to fast forward like halfway and see if they're still talking about Dr. K.
10-minute interaction. And I felt like in that case, you are on the one hand disclaiming that there's anything special. You're just a therapist. Nobody knows. The lazy guard.
Yeah, I don't care enough about Dr. K in order to listen for another fucking 10 minutes about it. I just don't. All right, let's rewind 5 seconds and move into the next segment.
Partner. Oh, that one that I was talking about was bad faith critics. That's what we refer to it as. Like everybody's a bad faith critic.
Oh no, I do have that one. It's just called "You're being so weird / obsessed" end quote. That's what I call that. But that addresses one half of the haters you were talking about. Another one I have here, I call this one the Webster Warrior or the Oxford Offensive. This is
I'm actually interested to see what the Webster Warrior is going to be, but with the Bad Faith Critics one, that is one that I loathe with every fiber of my being, and I'll call out some people real quick. So Hassan Piker does this all the time. His audience does this all the time, where they're like, "Oh, that's bad faith," and that clips out of context. And then you watch the context, and you're like, "It sounds like this is the argument," and then they're like, "Oh yeah, that is the argument." And so it's like, okay, so why were you saying it was bad faith? And you can just like endlessly circle that. And I feel like it's an 80 IQ argument. And by the way, not trying to be mean, but Xander Hall did this where somebody came into his chat and they were like, "Why don't you make better content?" And he was like, "You are clearly a bad faith conservative." And it's like, what the fuck does somebody not liking your content have to do with the philosophy of conservatism or being bad faith? You know what I'm saying? Like, bad faith means making arguments that you yourself don't believe. Okay, so bad faith is a real argumentative strategy in this space, but it's so overused. Like, as a matter of fact, I cringe when I say the word bad faith because it's so overused. With that being said, let's check out the Webster Warrior.
When you are arguing a topic that is like decently embedded in an academic field and somebody brings out the fucking dictionary definition of the word, that
I do this.
drives me insane, especially if you're arguing something like in like philosophy or something, right? Say you're doing like moral theory and you're arguing like what non-cognitivism means or what error theory might mean in the context of like ethics. And somebody's like, "Well, I looked up what error theory, I looked up both of these." And it's like, what? Why the fuck are we consulting a dictionary? The dictionary is giving you like the surface level common parlance use of a word. You would never, ever consult. You've never taken an exam in school where you like open the dictionary. It's always your biology book or your chemistry book or your history book or your law book, or whatever, right?
I don't think I do this. I don't try to use definitions to be like a pedant. I try to use definitions to make a concept more clear. And I am perfectly okay accepting somebody else's colloquial definition unless it's totally wrong. I think where I am most guilty of this is obviously with socialism, because as far as I know, in the Twitch and YouTube political space, whenever a lefty refers to socialism, they're talking about the decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production as a step to communism, which is the moneyless, stateless, classless society that is the end goal of Marxist theory. And when some righties use socialism, they literally mean when the government does stuff, and they use socializing as a colloquial term to refer to a public good or service. So they actually call public parks socialism. They call the fire department and law enforcement socialism. They call, I'm trying to think of what else, the military socialism. And for me, that's so fucking dumb. And I'm sorry for cussing so loud into your earballs, but it's so fucking dumb, because when we were fighting in World War II and the Cold War, were we fighting fascism and communism with socialism? And then isn't socialism, to as insofar as you believe these conflicts are necessary, is socialism necessary? Because then if you're conceding that some degree of socialism is necessary, then it's just a spectrum of how much government service you believe should be required in order for a society to function. And the clear answer is not no socialism, right? So libertarians and right-wingers using socialism to describe government services or public services, I think is so fucking stupid. But I already have some disagreement. Christian Blair says, Xander Hall, was he Kyle Kalinske of Twitch? Yeah, basically. Darko Laskowski says, people love to do this with atheism too. If you want to show me some examples, I'll read them if you type them in chat. Mega Zero says, seems like Trump is freaking out about a reporter asking him about the Epstein files. Yeah, fuck him. MAGA should absolutely hold his feet to the fire, and we should help MAGA hold his feet to the fire. Reckless says, socialist dumb. Connor, how could this be? True. Conservative liberalism says, socialism doesn't have to be stepped towards communism, though. Finns were socialistic in a lot of ways, but still resisted the Red Army. Yeah, sure. You could actually view, I think there's some people who are socialists who actually believe that decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production is good enough, and you don't need a moneyless, stateless class of society. I could see how that would be a differentiation. Yeah. Paul says, laugh my ass off. Yeah, it was the socialists versus the fascists. Oh, kill me now. JW says, see, I disagree with that. Okay, well, I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to euthanize myself on camera right now. Joking. I don't want to die that way. Reckless says, I came back at an awkward time, misunderstanding what you were saying. Good. Jack Darko says, socialism is when the government does stuff. Yeah, and when the government does a lot of stuff, it's communism. Kill me now. Kill me now. Anyways.
It's very high school debate team, right? The Western Dictionary defines narcissism as
I've got pushback for both of you at this point, though, a little bit. But it's contextual. It depends on the context, because we did an...
Yeah, if you're bringing it up to further clarify the point, it's not a problem. If you're bringing it up in order to obfuscate the point, then that's a problem.
Episode recently about like where Jordan Peterson was talking with Huberman, Andrew Huberman, and he made the claim that thought is secularized prayer. Now, that's a high-level idea, Destiny. Your brain might need a bit of time to comprehend it.
Take a moment to process that. Thought is secularized.
Prayer comes first in the evolutionary lineage, then comes thought, right? So you can pray before you can think.
Gotcha, okay.
Right. That seems an outlandish claim on the face of it, but he did mention, he's had this thought, he has some ideas about it, and he said, I have the quote. He said, I've looked at it, it's historic cause. Like, when do we start to think? That's not so obvious. We started to think of words after we developed the ability to use language. What's that? 150,000 years ago? Maybe it's longer than that. No one really knows it. But thought has its historical origins. The probability that it emerged from something like prayer, as far as I can tell, is 100%. But I'd like at some point, it's complicated, but I'd like to have a discussion with you about that. So it's an idea he had, a thought. The probability is 100%.
We started to think in words after we developed the ability to use language. What's that, 150,000 years? Maybe it's longer than that. No one really knows. But thought has its
Thank you.
historical origins. The probability that it emerged from something like prayer, as far as I can tell, is 100%. But I'd like to, at some point, it's complicated, but I'd like to have a discussion with you about that.
So I was talking with someone in our Patreon about that, right? And I think that's, on the face of it, a ridiculous claim. Like, unless you redefine prayer to mean a very unintuitive, non-standard definition, right? Because obviously, just for the logic example, there are plenty of other animals in the non-human lineage which show evidence of having thoughts, and they don't show any evidence of praying, right? Like, prayer seems to be reliant on having the ability to think. And on our Patreon, the person was like, well, how do you define prayer, right? Because they were religiously, or not religiously inclined, but they kind of like that kind of philosophical thing. And I was like, well, just take, I just looked up on Google, or took the first thing and was like, look, prayer, the first definition is a kind of like reflective thing directed at a...
Sorry, need to address chat. Shock Doctor says, I do think the understanding of socialism has changed throughout our lives. I think most people mean it by social safety nets and more socialization. People have dropped the commie parts. I don't agree at fucking all. And I really wish I could reverse this trend. I think that people like Hassan Piker and tankies and socialists and communists who actually understand these ideological definitions use the Scandinavian system as a Trojan horse with which to normalize socialist ideology. Like, I 100% disagree. And I don't want to concede this flexibility to the term, even if right-wingers want to use it this way, because what's going to happen is leftists, not lefties, leftists are going to use it as a way to Trojan horse socialism and communism, which should be objected to for various reasons. And then right-wingers are going to try to use it as a pejorative, using it in the Cold War context. But that Cold War context is going to lose its pejorative nature as we move increasingly away from the Cold War. And so the right wing will misuse it in order to vilify socialism. And then eventually it's going to lose its sting. And it, in many ways, it already has. And then the far left is going to use it as a Trojan horse to normalize extreme positions. So even if you observe that in modern conversational culture, I think that's a bad trend, like a real bad trend that could actually totally fuck us.
supernatural agent or God. And you're like, everybody understands what that means. But if you redefine it to a very specific thing where you say like prayer means engaging with unconscious, intuitive, mental activity. And you're like, but that's not what prayer means. So by redefining it like that, you're making an argument.
Oh, that's nice. There's people in chat who are steel manning Jordan Peterson, and I didn't understand enough of the conversation in order to steel man him myself. That makes me good. And Kay, we are away from the sex drama, so this content should be more to your liking.
Based on like semantic confusion from your redefinition, whereas like it kind of relies on the fact that people will mistake the common definition for your technical definition.
So there's two things that I would think of here. So the one thing I would caution is if you've ever got like a cool thought about like, where does language come from, or does thought precede language or whatever, like chances are a thought like that has been thought before by people that have written extensively on it. And be careful thinking that you're like wading into this kind of territory. Like my philosophy background is non-existent. Okay. Now, not from Wikipedia, but the Plato Stanford Wikipedia. Okay. So advanced thought, but like, this sounds like, I'm sure that, what is it like? I think rationalism versus empiricism, where the idea is like a rationalist would say that knowledge comes from pure reason and logic that we are a priori granted with no experience of the world. And an empiricist would say that knowledge is only derived through experience of the world. And there's like, I don't even know if I'm sure that debate, what I'm saying is probably settled, and there's probably like more advanced thought, and there are books and books and books on topics like these. So anytime somebody is like getting high on their own like farts, like,
no, there is a mouse there though, immediately to the right of the door when you walk out. Indy had a dead mouse. Why? Yeah, there's a dead mouse right there. It looks like mulch. Oh, then Indy did that. Guys, sorry, I'm gonna have to share this with you real quick. So my dogs are fierce hunters, and we have rabbits and mice and rats who live in the jungle behind our house. And so I think rats can be cute. They're disgusting, but they can be cute. A mouse can definitely be cute as well. And I think that rabbits are definitely cute. And so I have to, when I open up my back door in the middle of the night, because these animals typically come out at night, I have to like pause at the door and yell for a few seconds and be like, run rabbits, run mice, run Remy. You know, the rat from Ratatouille. I try to tell Remy to run away. But despite my best efforts to warn the wildlife at 11 p.m. when my dogs need to pee and poo, that my dogs are coming outside and they are on the verge of being murdered. My dogs have still successfully murdered several of God's creatures within the past week. They killed a rabbit. They basically beheaded it, and I had to throw it into the next behind my property. And then they have not caught a rat recently, but they have caught rats before. And then they definitely caught a mouse today. And apparently, I didn't have time to clean it up. So my wife just came in order to share the fact that my dog, who I love, my favorite dog actually, Indy, had eviscerated the rat and spread the the mouse. Unfortunately, it's a mouse. It's very cute. But had spread the vital organs across the back patio like a war trophy. Like, have you guys ever seen Yautja from the movie Predator? The alien species that like rips spines and skulls out of human bodies and displays their entrails as a warning sign. That's what my dog did to a mouse. So just because you love dogs doesn't mean that they're not ultimately still wolves.
Talking about stuff like this, I would always like be very cautious. Like, okay, well, what is your engagement with the literature? Because chances are that whatever you're talking about has been written so much more succinctly and has been expanded upon so much by so many different people talking about it. But that doesn't mean you should never talk about it, right? It's okay to I like to talk about philosophy and shit. I'm sure every single thing I've talked about has been endlessly opined on and pontificated on.
LB, stop making it worse.
By people that are way more intelligent and researched and read into in those fields than me. The second thing I will say is, so I actually will do this in debates, and it's an easy way to sidestep this stuff. Something that happens is somebody will say something like this. Somebody will say, all sex is rape. And what they're doing is they're drawing from the common understanding of what both these words mean. And it's like, whoa, holy shit. Oh my God. And they're like, okay, we'll talk through this. And it's like, well, if you really think about it, you can't consent to anything that you don't have knowledge of, and nobody will know what a dick feels like before it's in their body. So in a way, all sex is rape. And something doesn't feel quite right. And the trick that's happened is somebody is relying on a non-common definition of one of the terms, and they're using that non-common definition to pretend that they're saying something far more profound than they actually are. So when I feel like somebody's playing a word game like that, instead of trying to argue on the definition, whatever bullshit, I'll just ask, okay, wait, hold on. You're saying that all prayer precedes thought, right? That prayer comes first. Okay, hold on. What do you mean when you say prayer? And if somebody says like, oh, well, prayer is just like an idea that you have, or a hope, or some quality, some feeling that you have, then I'll say, okay, fine, let's define prayer that way. We're not really saying anything profound, though, are we? Would anybody even disagree with that? And I find that that's the way to short circuit that argument, because it's like you're not even saying anything profound. It just feels like you are, because you're relying on the standard common parlance understanding of these terms. You're redefining any.
Oh, fudge off, megastar. I'm like 20 minutes behind. What's wrong with Dan calling and threatening to steal his and Steven's content money? Crazy, yes, but I mean, it's his work. Okay, so if I say that I'm gonna, I want to beat someone's ass, should you call my wife and family and kids? And then also, megastar, that's not the only unhinged behavior. Apparently he's stalking Twitch's trust and safety team, and finding their social media and their family and friends and documenting it so we can use it as leverage against them later. That's fucking psycho shit. Don't sweep for that kind of fucking psycho behavior. If Hassan was doing that, you would call it psycho. If Ethan Klein was doing that, you would call it fucking psycho. It's psycho shit. It's bad behavior. He's a bored millionaire. He could be taking his wealth, talent, time, and energy and making the world a better place, and instead he's harassing people online. It's fucking cringe. Don't sweep for that shit. Not in my chat anyways. You can sweep for it somewhere else.
Unique way that removes all of the profoundness from your statement.
That's exactly it. Like, I actually brought that up in the conversation with the person. Like, if you redefine it in the way that it means, like the kind of thing you're talking about, it's a banal truism, right? That like before you have deep self-conscious reflective mental processes, you have more unreflective ones, and you're like, well, yes, but everyone agrees that. But just to mention as well, just to add a defense for myself as a self-interested one, in the case with Peterson specifically and prayer, my actual academic area of expertise is in the cognitive science of religion. And in that conversation, he was constantly referencing to Dawkins. Like, Dr. Dawkins does not know the literature on cultural evolution and the scientific study of religion. If he did, he would know, how out of his depth he is.
I know the literature on the history of religious ideas. I see how these ideas have battled across millennia in a manner that is very reminiscent to me of the same sort of claim that Dr. Dawkins is putting forward with regards to meme. I know that literature. Dr. Dawkins doesn't know that literature. And it's very difficult for me to communicate from within the confines of that literature because it's extensive and deep.
I know that literature. That's like my research area. And Peterson is still a waffly, like, he's just giving what you talked about, his kind of like philosophical, intuitive insights. It's not deeper than that, but he's referencing the fact that he knows that literature as a...
Isn't that more lazy Gardner than whatever the hell we're talking about now? I thought we were talking about the Webster Warrior. Did I miss one? Scrolling. Bad Faith Critics, the Webster Warrior. I didn't miss one, and it feels like we're back to lazy Gardner. Anyways, Ethan is suing Hassan's friends for content theft. And? Problem? I mean, I think it's fucking cringe, but just say it's cringe. Hold on. Melody says, read your last chat. What's your fucking last chat, bro? I'm scrolling up. You understand when there's 200 people, it's fucking hard to see everybody's fucking chat, right? Melody, I've already scrolled up 20 or 30 people and I don't fucking see you. So type your shit out again. All right? Don't tell me to look for your one chat out of a chat of 200. That's fucking crazy.
A kind of like performative, like show of strength that you can't argue against. But in my case, I actually know literature, so I'm like, no, like that does not support what you want to argue here.
Megastar. So I think Megastar caught up in chat. Yeah, he called his fucking place of business, and I think he DM'd his wife. Yeah, that's fucking crazy.
Here. And the other example that came to me was Vosh debating with, I think it was a philosophy
Aqua, that was so dope.
professor.
Dr. Broad or Board or something. I know who you're talking about, yeah.
About water, right? And he's like, actually, the philosophy professor was talking that people have the concept of water, even if they don't know the chemical like definition of H2O. And he was saying, well, actually, they didn't call it water, they called it aqua. Because it was the Spanish word.
And by the way, it's agua, not aqua. I think aqua is the color and agua is water.
Maybe we could agree that water is H2O. That was true even before we knew about chemistry. That was the definition of water before anybody knew anything about chemistry, before we knew about H2O. Back when Aristotle thought water was just an element. Nevertheless, it was H2O. I'm sorry?
This isn't true.
Yes, it is, Vosh. I fucking hate this clip so much. Sorry. Haterade says, I missed the part of Dan and what he's doing, but I'm in support of what he's doing. Hassan and Twitch hate America and they want to destroy our country and values their propaganda. Okay. One of my values is free association, freedom of conscience, and freedom of speech. So while I will laugh when Hassan Piker eventually is randomly held to Twitch terms of service, and I will laugh when a adpocalypse comes and smashes on Twitch, I still think that, you know, whatever happened to, sir, I may detest what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. That's liberalism. That's freedom of conscience. That's freedom of speech. And so I wish I could deport Hassan. I actually think he's like an actual enemy of the United States. I wish I could denaturalize him and fire him from a fucking catapult towards Cuba and just hopefully, you know, he's able to swim. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would love to do to Hassan Piker. That being said, if I set the precedence that if you're critical of the United States of American government and you're sympathetic to its enemies, you can be denaturalized, I think I would make the world a worse place. So, yeah. My instincts are at cross paths, which what I think is good for the world.
Oh. Water has not always been H2O?
Yeah, all you have to do is cross the Mexican border. And over there, it's aqua. That's H2O, not water.
Aqua means water. Aqua is water.
It's a different term.
Actually, it's agua. It's not aqua, right?
And we're referring
True.
to terms and definitions here.
No, I'm referring to water.
Like at that point, it's just like, it is absolutely philosophical semantic. And I mean, in that case, it's not even philosophy. That's just pure sophistry.
I think one of the things I would like to stress to like my audience is that you hear this term a lot, or I don't know if I brought this up last time, but maybe you guys can disagree with me if you feel like I'm misguided here, but like, there's this idea that there is so much research out there and there's so much literature and there's so many positions. You hear this phrase a lot. You can justify any position if you go looking for the right study. And that's like true in a very pedantic, like not true sense. The reality is what I found is that in any given field, in any given established field with an idea that's been argued for a long time, it's very rare that there are these hugely different studies that don't all coalesce around a single point. There's generally like a couple of really...
I'm still going to listen to this, but I'm going to lift weights while I'm listening to this.
well-regarded authors, or a few very landmark studies, or like really like looked up to meta-analyses that are published in high-impact journals that will usually say like, okay, like this is about where the research is. Yeah. It's pretty rare that you can go and find a study that demonstrates something of a significantly different magnitude, like meaning that somebody might say, oh, this drug cures this disease and this drug does nothing. Well, there might be two like directions where it's like this drug does nothing and this drug helps maybe a little bit, right? That might be something you might see in a field. Yeah. It's like research feels like very overwhelming, but it's not really. Like you can just, if you're just willing to Google and like read through stuff, you'd be surprised at how tangible a lot of these fields are, unless you're getting into like really complicated, like medicine stuff or like, you know, neuroscience stuff where it starts to get like really complicated. A lot of that stuff is really accessible. Really good example is I heard Tim Pool cite a study that he said that he heard Jordan Peterson.
I hate the anti-realism. That's one thing that actually pisses me off about Vosh and I've seen Vosh orbiters use this before, where they act like because there's an exception to a rule that like reality is ununderstandable, and that shit pisses me off to no end. Reason Riff says, you need a lifting cam. I'm planning to do a weightlifting sesh while talking politics on stream at some point. Yeah, welcome to the club, King. Let's do it. You're right. I should get a weightlifting cam. Although it will be embarrassing because I'm doing such like normal, low weight, medium impact lifts.
Talk about a study where in Sweden, they saw that when women earned more than men, they were more likely to leave them in relationships. And I was really curious. Like, what the fuck is the source? I'm really curious. I want to hear that. That's interesting to me. And I Googled it. And then I found Peterson making that exact same claim. And he said, well, in Sweden, they did a study. Like, okay. And I Googled more and I found the study, and it was a study, and it didn't say that. It said that women that got jobs in politics that were like elected to positions might have been more likely to leave their husbands than women that didn't win these elected positions. So it's already a particular cohort that was even more narrow than that. But the really fascinating thing is, and this is another thing, okay, I wish more people realize, okay, researchers are not stupid. So when you hear a study that says people that eat French fries are more likely to be fat than people that aren't, and your first thought is, I wonder if they controlled for socioeconomic steps. Yes, they did. I promise you that your immediate assertion that I wonder if they controlled for the most basic covariate ever, they absolutely have thought of that. But not only have they probably thought of that, if you actually read the methodology, sometimes they have really clever ways of dealing with that, which is even more interesting than like the study itself. So in this particular Swedish study, that was one of the hypotheses where they were like, we think that, or one of the ideas is that maybe it's because women who out-earn their husbands are more likely to move on to different partners. And there are two really interesting things that they found when they teased apart other variables. One is they found that the woman was that they looked at the number of men in the next office that the woman moved to see if there was any correlation between her likelihood of leaving her partner, and they found none. But the second thing they found was something that was highly correlated with whether or not they would split apart was how traditional their views were on relationships. With the more traditional the view being, the more likely they were to separate, and that when you got the views to align perfectly, where they both had relatively liberal views on relationships, it disappeared almost completely whether or not the woman would leave the man. So the ironic part is that the conclusion of that study showed the exact opposite of what Peterson and Tim Pool were claiming that study demonstrated. And this should be, I understand that all the disciplines are relatively specific, but this should be something that's close enough to Peterson's field of study that he should absolutely not be making that mistake. Like he shouldn't even be citing his credentials if he can't read what I could understand in 20 minutes. It's a very easy, very basic study to read. So
you almost cannot overstate how incredibly lazy they are.
Yes. Okay. So I think that I'm not even going to bother steel manning it because the study almost isn't the point. The point is the hypergamous shifting cultural attitude. So like tradition might be a self-reinforcing thing, but you understand that like most men want to be the breadwinner, and it's not a question of like should, right? Should is very subjective. I'm going to say should, but your should could be as strong as mine. And so what I'm going to say is men historically have oftentimes allowed domestic responsibilities and child rearing to go to the woman, and oftentimes women have to some degree preferred nurturing. Now that could be a function of biology, it could be a function of culture. I have no idea. And so the question is, what do we do with the information that's being presented? The way that JBP, according to Steven, misinterpreted the claim is that once they controlled for temperament, for traditional perspectives on relationships, then that was the predictor on women making more money leaving their men. But it stands to reason, if that is the general perspective of society, then that's going to be a predictive factor within whether or not relationships break up. Now, the progressive or liberal interpretation, what they would say prescriptively is, well, we should just stop giving a shit about gender roles. But the truth is that we have gender roles because they're partially rooted in biology. So I think these things, while you can say that Jordan Peterson is being lazy and mischaracterizing the original study, which is fine, you can criticize him for that. I don't care. But the point is, like, we should still argue about those shoulds, 100%. And we should also argue about the descriptives that lead up to those shoulds. Because I don't think telling men to not feel emasculated by their partner making a shitload of money is gonna magically change. I don't even think if you make a bunch of Mr. Mom sitcoms where the dad does all these like nurturing roles, I don't think you're going to change society. Even after like 100 years of pro Mr. Mom propaganda, I still think that these things are so biologically rooted that it's going to be predictive. LB says, Connor, you're caught up in the chat. I'm proud of you. Thanks. Haterade says, Counterpoints. If Hassan is not a liberal and hates liberal rights, why should we give him the privilege of our rights that he detests? Because freedom is the freedom to do right and to do wrong. If you don't have the freedom to do wrong, then you don't have freedom. Reckless says, I want to be the breadwinner. I don't even want children. It just feels wrong to me to have someone else look out for me financially, but I feel good when looking out for other people financially. Well, you can look out for me financially anytime, Reckless. True Zealous is just my new daily reminder that the real Goblin short stack isn't in chat or in Bosch's naughty folders, but currently on screen and on. Oh, come on. Come on. That was rude. Andy B says telling dudes not to feel emasculated is like telling people just to stop feeling sad. Exactly. Reason Riff says we should stop caring directly by gender roles, but equally not be surprised when more men are laboring and more women are in nursing roles. Sure. LB with the constant comments that are going to piss me off. It sounds like men need to grow up. There are plenty of women who want to stay home and raise babies. Other women want career. You should look at other cultures where men do take care of kids. Okay, cool. I'll tell all the emasculated men that they should just Google Scandinavia, and I'm sure that'll make them feel better.
And you know, this goes to what we're saying about this decorative scholarship, decorative citing, and that is all it is. And you know, you've cited the most egregious version of it, where they're not even citing something real, doesn't even exist. But let's say the study did support the thing that they were claiming, right? What the second worst thing that people do is just cherry picking. Like as you know, on any interesting topic has probably been the subject of hundreds of empirical studies. Some of them are high quality, some of them are low quality. You know, some of them are flashy. People pick up on the flashy one. This includes journalists and the rest of us as well. It's not just gurus and influencers. But it's a big red flag when somebody goes, well, this, you know, Huberman does this, Andrew Huberman. He finds some study that, you know, rings his bell and goes, this, you know, and it's this one study changes everything. It's completely, you know, I'm changing my personal health regime, you know, and like anytime someone does that, it shows that they don't really understand how the literature works. As you said, it's not that hard to, like in most empirical fields, a consensus does emerge. Sometimes it's a bit vague, sometimes it's very confident, but there is like a median average thing, you know, these meta-analyses and things get at it. And that's the thing you should be paying attention to, not some random little cherry pick study that rings your bell. Anyway.
And if you're actually reading it, even on the random small ones, because people throw a lot of research under the bus, if you read them, they'll, like good studies will say they're citing to, because a study doesn't have time to study every single thing in the field. They'll usually say, we're investigating this because of, you know, this at all, and this study here, they said this and they said that, and we're working off of this and that. And they'll be citing to other literature. And if they're giving a take that's new or flashy or contrary to the field, not only will they say that, like, oh, we feel like we've demonstrated something unique here, usually in the conclusion, almost always, if these are smaller studies, they'll say this could be for a variety of reasons. This would be a really interesting area for future research to expand upon. I have never in my life read a real something that's not off that fucking Medvix or whatever weird preprint shit where people can post fucking anything, right? I've never read a study where somebody comes up to this like crazy novel conclusion, and then in the conclusion, like, we believe we've completely redefined this field because of this one study, you know, N equals 12, where we've proven empirically that iron actually kills your heart and you shouldn't, like, that just never happens, you know?
You're perhaps giving too much credit to academia, just because I'm aware of counter examples that you could cite, but generally speaking, that is like true.
Okay.
The more
maybe I'm lucky to say no, the bigger journals with the bigger researchers. I'm sure there is some dog shit research out there, to be fair. Sure,
there was a study published in the leading psychology journal that claimed that you could do the manipulation, like the experimental manipulation, after collecting the outcome measure, and the effect would go back in time retroactively and like affect the result, right, across 9 studies. So that obviously,
reverse time.
Shock Doctor says, I think the main question is, should we be giving privileges to those who take them away from us, who would take them away from us in the same moment? Yeah, we should. We live in a constitutional republic. We have something called the Bill of Rights. And we have enshrined that these things will not change. I think it's unless it's like a 60% amount of like representatives vote to change these. And these are good rules. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people to keep be secure in their persons, houses, and papers and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. These are all good rules. And the only way that you can change these is, like conservative liberalism says, is with a supermajority. And I like republicanism. Okay? So if you want to change these laws, the reason why fascists are losing right now is because the courts are saying, no, this is not in line with the Constitution, therefore we're going to strike down your action. You can say that Trump is ignoring the rule of law as maximally as possible, but I want you to think about this. What has he done? He's deported and abused non-citizens. But he hasn't been able to mobilize the military in order to take over the country. He hasn't been able to destroy the Supreme Court or destroy the legislature. He hasn't been able to, all the times that he's denied these rights to American citizens and even to non-citizens, he's gotten sued, right? So no, the midterms are going to be fucking excellent. And we should still cling to our principles and to our republic. It's a republic if we can keep it. And the republic has survived worse. Bullshit. You guys are hanging out with way too many fucking doomers. Gen X says, barely are the courts doing that. Some are legal immigrants, though. I'm calling bullshit. And the reason why I'm calling bullshit is because we are playing with an existential crisis. But this is nowhere near as bad as the American Civil War. And we survived the American Civil War. So don't buy into this doomer bullshit. The republic is over. Trump and his cronies are going to take over the country. Bullshit. And if we got to go the other way, then we'll go the other way when it's necessary. You don't give up the republic just because people are bad actors. If we did that, then we would never have had a fucking republic to begin with. Didn't we just lose birthright citizenship? I don't think so. I think they said that the courts only have the ability to rule on things within their jurisdiction. Birthright citizenship revoked. I think the reason why everybody's panicking about that is because that the federal government can interpret citizenship the way that it wants, and then it can strip citizenship. It can strip citizenship and then try to deport people who are born citizens, but those born citizens are going to be able to sue. So yeah. No, you lost birthright last week. Where? What citizen has been denaturalized and is getting deported right now, and has that person sued, and is it going through the courts? Shock Doctor says, I really like what you're saying and agree with the most part. I'm just extremely worried about the courts and Congress pussing out. Yeah, you should be. And you should be goddamn angry. JS says, every legal challenge that the court rules down the middle on moves the needle closer to authoritarianism. This is a victory for Trump. Counterpoints? I don't think so. LB says, no, Connor, how do you think we got to Civil War? It took years. We don't stand for it. Who do you think I'm saying stands for it? Do you think I'm saying support these people? I'm just saying scale your fucking outrage once again. It's not retroactive. New babies, Connor. Okay, then that needs to be challenged in court. Yeah, Gen X says, no, we haven't lost birthright yet. There was a 30-day stay. There is already a class action suit making its way through the courts to deal with it before it takes place. Thank you, Gen X. Yeah. Be radicalized. Be radicalized. But I'm not telling you to go on a fucking terrorist attack. I'm telling you to vote in the midterms, and anybody who is MAGA, you punish. Anybody who's MAGA or anybody who's made peace with MAGA, you punish electorally. Mega Zero says the only birthright citizenship I don't like is the kind of people who come here when they are about to drop just so they have citizens. Yeah, but dude, you need to think, number one, it's 30,000 people per year estimated do this baby tourism. Number two, do you know how much that speaks to the power of the United States that even our enemies have their children here in order to gain the privileges of the United States? Number one, it's statistically rare as shit. Number two, do you know how much that means? So in these 30 days, people can't get citizenship? I have no fucking idea. Ask Jet X. She's smarter than me. You guys are dicks. All right. Anyways, back to the content. LB, keep freaking out. You're making... This is what you do to me every day, LB. You piss me off and you spurg out. So if you're spurging out in my chat, just consider this just desserts.
From causation, as stupid as it sounds. So yeah, you know, so terrible stuff is published, but yeah.
But the point is well taken. And I would say as well that there's things, Stephen, where people will reference the replication crisis or the issues with, like, you know, low-end studies or low-quality studies, this kind of thing in academia. But in the way that Matt talked about with decorative scholarship, it's like decorative reference to the replication crisis, because what those people almost always know nothing about is like the methodological reform efforts. If you ask them to describe what's a registered report, I think 99% of them have no idea. They don't understand how to interpret even p-values, right? Which is like a very basic level of knowledge, but they will reference that there is like this crisis of confidence in all research because of this issue. And those are legitimate issues. There's legitimate reform movements. There's the open science movement. There's the whole existence of preprint servers is kind of related to that. And there's lots of good work going on there. Lots of solutions coming as well. And the whole like heterodox media podcast ecosystem, they talk about the problems in academia and whatever. And I never once hear them bring on somebody from that movement to talk about, you know, registered reports or about pre-registration processes or whatnot. So it's all just kind of culture war gristle, right? Like that's why they care. So in the same way, I was going to bring this up, but like it kind of fits under the selective citation thing that, especially with the conspiracy prone and anti-vax gurus, right? If there is anything official in a study that comes out that they can spin as supporting their narrative, like their anti-vaccine narrative, like there's a study recently came out and Brett Weinstein is claiming it vindicates all his stuff that he claimed about spike from the COVID vaccine spreading to the heart and all this kind of thing, then you completely accept that study uncritically. It's absolutely valid. This confirms everything I've said, but all of the masses of studies that contradict the claims of the anti-vaxxers that show, you know, there's billions of doses given to people all around the world. And we don't see the effects that you would anticipate if what they said came true.
Fernandez Souza says, removing dropping in just to have an American child is an attack on South American countries' culture, and I'll not stand for it. Based.
They just dismiss. And I seen this when you were debating some MAGA person and they were citing statistics. And then in the next sentence, when you were saying, well, but we're, you know, immigration statistics. So where are you? What about the fact that this has went down? And they were like, well, I don't believe.
Yeah,
so, yeah, like how can you trust statistics? Yeah, so it's like Schrodinger's statistics that when they support you, they're perfectly valid. When the papers give you, you know, like an anti-vax narrative, well, this is legitimate, but all of the counter evidence.
So hold on. I think that LB keeps saying the word Trumpedo, which I think she's trying to call him a pedophile, right? But that's not what I see in my mind's eye. I don't see him being a pedophile. I see this. I see Trump as a torpedo because it has the same like pattern. It has the same syllables like torpedo is 3 syllables. Torpedo, whereas pedo is 2. So this is what I see in my mind's eye every time you call him Trumpedo. I don't see a pedophile. I see him as a sea missile. Christian Blair says, every Dem condemned the violence of the riots. Every one, Trump still won't say whether or not he lost 2020, and you probably don't believe it either, like half the country. Yeah, Trump sucks. I'm not saying be lackadaisical. I'm just saying don't be a terrorist. Reckless says, I don't understand how people don't see that the Supreme Court defederalizing a bunch of major issues is a win for everyone. It helps remove single issue voting for president. It puts the power at a lower level, meaning your vote on it counts much more. Local efforts to convince people is more impactful, and it removes federal court over issues that there's no federal control over. It's mostly because people in red states will lose rights that people in blue states believe they should be entitled to, like abortion. And also, it technically gives the green light on blue states in order to violate the Second Amendment. Not that they're not already doing it, but you know what I'm saying? They might be able to do it worse. Noonan says he has been torpedoing the GOP. True. True. All good. All good. All right, let's continue.
It's just corrupt. You don't believe the official institutions. You think they're going to tell you the truth?
You should.
Okay, guys, come on. Let's get to the next talking point because you guys are circling. It's fun. I like this content, but you're circling.
Force, like, I think the cruelest thing you could do to an American is enforce like some kind of epistemic consistency. I said that if you were a vaccine like skeptic and you thought the mRNA vaccines were rigged and horrible and evil and they were just trying to kill you, you should be banned from taking any type of the like Ozempic, semaglutide stuff. You don't get any of it. You don't get any. Why would you trust Big Pharma then? Now all of a sudden, what is the thing that could clearly help you? And the results are obviously immediately. Fuck you. You don't get any of that shit. Why would you trust them now? That's insane.
Yeah, this is one of the funny inconsistencies with the conspiratorial worldview, where it's completely inconsistent with how people live their lives. Like in a modern society, every time you open a can of baked beans, right, you're trusting like hundreds of strangers that were involved in the production of this thing not to do some nefarious things to it.
Jordan Peterson failed this test when I asked him about. I said,
"True, I saw this clip. And I did feel like it was a JBPL." It's true.
When you start your car, you're trusting that it's going to start again. He's like, oh, I don't trust that. I've started my car before. And it's like, okay, well, obviously there's a first time you started the car. What a stupid fucking like rejection of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's actually just, we are talking about, by the way, to return us to the track. So I had my second one was shameless hypocrisy, right? Shameless hypocrisy. And this is kind of that thing, like that MAGA guy. That was actually one of the examples I was going to say, that you can cite statistics and in the next sentence say that you don't trust any statistics, right? And another example that came up in recent content we looked at was Huberman talking with Jordan Peterson, and they were talking, as they often are, about the...
Sorry, Shock Doctor, you and we are on the same team. Oh, fuck, dude. Is populism just a problem of democracy? In my opinion, it is. If so, is there like a group that supports actual republicanism? Bro, I just want the Dem left-leaning policy in a Republican system. Depends on what policies you want. But yeah, that's kind of what I support. I still want freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, right to self-defense, limited government, all that shit. And then I think that you need to have some social welfare programs in order to make sure that people can succeed. So yeah, that's my politics. I fucking hate populism. I hate direct democracy. I think it's very dumb.
Moral decay of society, people are, they're sleeping around, they're doing all these things. And he tut-tutted about Californication and how, David Duchovny's character was a sex addict and was giving a bad role model. And where are the adults in the room, Destiny? Like, where are these people that we can look up to?
The show was Californication, David Duchovny. And I realized this show is all about the adults acting like children and the children acting like adults.
Oh yeah, that's a tip.
Problem? What's the problem with this assessment?
Typical Hollywood inversion.
And I thought, this is terrible. Not because I'm some sort of moral avenger or something, but it just...
You should be a moral avenger. You should be more like Counterpoints. I hear he's a massive moral avenger.
It was sort of like the question I've been asking myself a lot over the last few years is, like, who are the adults in the room? Like, who's actually regulating all this stuff that's happening? Everyone's in disagreement. People are misbehaving in the kind of worst of ways by not treating each other with respect.
Now, I don't know if you know about Huberman, but he's had a scandal where he was essentially running like an unknown sex harem with 6 women, where he was simultaneously having, like, presenting them as being in long-term, exclusive relationships.
Ah, the appeal to hypocrisy. Got it.
So they were in a polycule, but they didn't know.
Okay, with 6 women, that's a stronger endorsement for anything that Huberman has ever done.
Yeah, his optimizing.
Okay.
I hate you. Because Huberman, I know you guys might not have seen him before, but he's all about like gene hacking and human optimization and good meal patterns and good psych patterns in order to like master your biology. So Steven is saying, despite the fact that Huberman is obviously a hypocrite and objectionable for running 6 different women at the same time who all thought they were in committed relationships, but it turns out he was cheating on all of them all at the same time. He's like, oh, that's based. Fucking destiny.
The descriptions in the thing, it sounded like a complete nightmare to manage. Like you have to be jumping around a lot and doing all these things. But like, so the issue isn't like, whatever his personal life.
Reckless says the half of the country that believes Trump actually won in 2020 have moved on and don't care anymore. As far as I can tell, the only people I see bringing it up on the leftists with nothing else to say. Reckless, you understand that's a fucking problem, right? You understand that's a problem? Like if you said in this one election, the federal government stole the election, then any time you lose, you can claim that it was stolen. And anytime you win, you can say, oh, we just outplayed them. You understand how bad of a fucking social precedent that is to not know what the truth of a federal election is? That's so bad.
It's the level of hypocrisy to complain about like a fictional TV show, teaching bad values where people are just having casual sex or, treating people for their own gratification. And Huberman had this huge scandal. So like Peterson didn't mention this at all. And similarly, when lamenting the lack of adults in the room, while Jordan Peterson and Huberman, especially Jordan Peterson, but also Huberman, are kind of pandering to Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, calling them the X-Men, of the political arena. So it's just that level that they seem absolutely immune from hypocrisy denting them. Like if I had a big, huge public sex scandal like Huberman, I wouldn't then lament publicly about.
LB, you just say stuff to piss me off. Connor, we already have direct democracy except for the presidency. What the fuck are you talking about? You don't vote on municipal ordinances. It's done by the city council. You don't vote on zoning laws. It's done by the city council. You don't vote on water treatment at the county level. The county does that, and you appoint your county commissioner. What the fuck are you talking about? I know you're talking about the Electoral College, but you don't live in a direct democracy. You do not vote on the policies of your city or your county, and you barely do it at the state level. The state does its own legislation, and then you can propose new legislation by getting massive amounts of signatures. But the vast majority of legislation passed in the state is not passed through ballot initiatives. Why would we even have a representative body if all of America was direct democracy? LB, you said that just to make me angry. What the fuck?
Californication, teaching bad morals, but it doesn't seem to register.
The biggest and most unbelievable application of this was the Tenetpedia thing.
Oh, yeah.
The 2 big ones were Tim Pool and Dave Rubin each got $5 million.
Right? Lauren Southern got substantively less. That's why we still stand Lauren Southern. She got like 50K. I don't know the exact number, but apparently it's substantively less.
Remember, this guy sells himself as an investigative journalist. If you couldn't even investigate the own fucking scam right in front of your face, why would I ever trust you on your opinion on anything ever?
Oh, Andy B. Listen, welcome to the chat, but fuck off. a bunch of fucking soy Democrats on Twitter bitching about how Putin did a fucking psyop on Facebook, so technically Hillary Clinton should have won, is not the same as the false elector scheme. That has to be the biggest fucking cope I've seen in this chat. And I've seen some crazy shit in this chat.
What an insane! I can't imagine if I'd been found to have been taking like $5 million from Israel in my Israel-Palestine debates, or $5 million from the Biden administration. Like, that is unbelievable. And not only did he, like, that was just unreal. He escaped. They both escaped that without a scratch. Nobody cares. That's insane to me.
I think the common denominator there is that there's a massive disconnect. Like, things don't add up. There's an inconsistency there, and people should notice it. Right? You can't present yourself as being an intrepid investigative journalist that you're really seeing clearly to the bottom of things, and then and then go, oh, I'm so naive and I didn't know. I just thought it was a present. Like, but it seems that the fans don't really notice the inconsistencies.
See you, old school. Have fun.
Or they just don't care about them. They're good at like speaking words that don't mean anything. Like when people say mainstream media, they don't mean the mainstream media. They mean ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC. How many people do you hear ever show me one time this has ever happened where one of these centrists or right wingers go like, the mainstream media is just completely out of whack? Did you see what Tucker Carlson said? Did you see what, Janine, Mariana, whatever? It's
gotcha, Andy B. I love you. Sorry for yelling.
Never that. It's always the mainstream media and then all the people on the left. When people bring up the replication.
That's okay, Gen X. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Crisis. How many of them talk about issues related to like peer review or anything having to do with statistics? I would be the richest man on the planet if I had $1 every time somebody mixed up the phrase statistically significant with what they actually mean is effect size. People will say statistically significant when they really mean it's just really far away from the measure thing, right? They're like statistically significant just means it's not the null, right? Right? Anytime somebody brings up the replication crisis, they'll always pretend that it's just like the woke sciences that are impacted by this. When, if I understand this correctly, I think Nature was the one that did a huge survey of all the sciences, and I think chemists, were the ones that reported the biggest issue. And nobody ever talks about the replication crisis, and they're like, we should reevaluate how we do like peer review, or maybe there's not enough money in replicating non-sexy research. It's always like we got to get rid of the woke basket weavers that are ruining everything.
Well, on that note, Destiny, like some of the weakest studies are in the fields that the right wing really love, like evolutionary psychology. This kind of women like to nest, women like to hunt, that kind of thing. It's some of the most incredibly weak research that never replicates, but that never causes a concern.
None of these guys ever seem to realize all these podcasts you guys listen to on social issues. You realize that these guys are all practicing essentially for Red Pill. It's gender studies. It's essentially what we're practicing here, or like sociological phenomenon. That's what we're all doing.
True Zealot, sorry, real quick, says Ohio has historically been a swing state. We legalize abortion and weed. Doesn't sound like a MAGA stronghold. Just a lot of people who equivocated the riots in January 6th. Yes, but I don't think that MAGA should view that as a mandate. And the reason why is because lots of Republicans, especially Republicans under the age of 50, they don't really give a shit about weed. And they barely give a shit about abortion. The social conservatives are maybe like 20% of the American population. They're the people who care about abortion, who got a major victory through the overturning of Roe v. Wade, excuse me. And they didn't win at the ballot. If you had voted, if those had not been, this is actually a counter argument to LB. I don't think there was a single ballot initiative that overturned abortion. It was all representatives in red states. I almost guarantee you that if those were ballot initiatives, they all would have failed. Because the truth is, people might not like abortion and they might not like weed, but they don't like the government telling them what to do more. Gnarly Cool says, I have work to do. Thanks for distracting me, lol. You're welcome. Sacred Snow says, Lauren receiving substantively less is a good point. For the longest time, my largest reason why I believe Poole was an agent rather than an asset is because the sum of money was so large that it was either unbelievably stupid or he knew what was going on. Of course, now his constant line and rewriting of the tenant scandal proves it for me. Can't say the same for Lauren Southern. That's Lauren's problem, is that she's a fucking believer. She actually believes all the crazy shit she says.
Here, right? When we talk about like, gay culture and woke culture and all that, this is all like sociological in nature. It's the softest of the sciences and you're practicing it as like a profession, but making fun of the discipline is so stupid. Yeah.
That seems to relate. No, I will say, Destiny, that I think like the worst replication rates were in the social science.
Sorry. I keep interrupting because chat keeps saying serious shit. Vlad Darius Serban says, not going to lie to y'all. I was never one to care about optics, and then I followed Destiny on Twitter. Suffer with us, brother. Suffer.
Fields, but that
For sure.
not the hard sciences, but there were issues, especially like there's Stuart Ritchie has a good book called Science Fictions, which is mostly focused on like medical, bad science, and it's very bad. But in any case, the thing that you're talking about, I had this one that I labeled faux centrism and heterodoxy, right? And it is that thing.
Faux centrism, heterodoxy. They're talking about me, chat. They're talking about me. I'm actually the only heterodox person. Faux centrism, heterodoxy. And I think it's because what they're going to point out is that all of the centrists broke right wing, all of the prominent centrists broke MAGA, and the ones who didn't suffered substantively. That's my prediction for this one. But let's see what they have to say, not what I have to say.
That you're talking about, where like a Constantine Kissin at trigonometry presents himself.
Oh, fuck yourself.
As sometimes says that he's like center left, or he's on a.
Sorry, hold on. Andy B says swing states changed. DeSantis shifted Florida to a deep red. Yeah, but marijuana missed by 3%, and I think that abortion missed by 2%. And by the way, I think we had to have a majority. So, and it wasn't 51-49. I think we needed a super majority. I think we needed to pass 66%. And I want to say like weed and abortion got into the high 50s.
Affiliated or politically homeless or whatever, but his favorite politician is Nigel Farage. His favorite political pundits are Douglas Murray and
Hold on, I have to get one guide. Proto Bro says, imagine still calling yourself Destiny's friend after all we know of him and calling yourself a man. Well, I'm an adult human male. I have testes. I have a penis. I can grow a decent beard. I lift weights. I joined the Marine Corps. I have a 4-year degree. I served in law enforcement, and I would consider a healthy chunk of those achievements masculine and or manly. So, Proto Bro, can you also, Genghis Khan was a fucking rapist. He literally murdered people and raped thousands of women, which I would consider substantively less than leaking homemade pornography on the internet. Would you say Genghis Khan is less manly than Steven? Are you a dumbass? Anyways, so Proto Bro, feel free to share your achievements in chat, and we'll evaluate your levels of maleness and masculinity. Dumbass.
Good when Trump has always been misrepresented. Biden is a walking corpse, and it's always the same. Joe Rogan and Elon Musk must be praised, must be like kind of endorsed. And I seen that when you had the conversation with Batya Ungar Sargon, like from Free Press recently, right? And when she was talking to you, initially...
Oh my God, the brainwashing lady, the crazy, evil, yes.
So she framed it initially that you are both disenfranchised, like liberals, you're basically on the same team, even though she's a Trump MAGA populist. And in that interview with you, she kind of said, she's not sure if she's for Trump, but she was, she was out kind of like already very clearly promoting Trump. And just recently, for example, I know during that
who are they talking about?
Interview, you did what I thought was a very good thing of, highlighting, pushing her and saying, wait,
I think I got upset by the end. I was like, we are not the same at all. Like, there's no shot. Yeah, I think because I knew I've heard this game a million times. It's so stupid. Yeah.
But that appeal, right, often works where people like try to emphasize that they're similar. And she recently on the Free Press, Barry Weiss's podcast, suggested that Elon Musk and stuff's promotion of the H-1B visas is actually like a front for the PRC, who have control of Elon Musk because of his economic interests in China. So
Yeah, Barry Weiss does do cringe. The thing that you need to understand about Barry Weiss is that she probably is a liberal and fairly progressive person, but Zionism is the only thing that'll dictate her politics. So if the Republican Party is more pro-Zionist than the Democratic Party, then she will sweep for the Republican Party. That's the way I understand Barry Weiss.
She's like cooked, right? She's really conspiratorial, like hard MAGA. But in her self-presentation to you, it's like centrism. So there's this thing of like, yeah, just folk-centrism and heterodoxy seems rampant. Brett Weinstein still refers to himself as like, what is it, a leftist or progressive, but he did a event like called Rescue the Republic to promote Trump with Russell Brand and, all of the MAGA people. So yeah.
You've never in your life heard somebody online be like, man, both sides have a lot of problems. So I'm not really sure who I should support. So it's probably why I'm just probably gonna vote for Harris. You've never heard somebody say that ever. People that are always doing
that was me. They're talking about me. I'm just not popular enough to talk shit about.
and that shit, they're always 2016, 2020, 2024 Trump supporters, like or 2020, 2024 Trump supporters every single time, And it's like, man.
Dude, I'm literally the one guy who was like, God, everybody's a piece of shit, but Kamala Harris is the lesser of two evils. Fuck. I know he's not trying to talk shit, but that's actually mad funny.
It's so hard to decide who to vote for. And it's like, oh, really? What do you think about the vaccines? Fake and rigged. Oh, what do you think about the 2020 election? Clearly, mail-in ballots were rigged. Oh, what do you think about Andrew Tate? Clearly, political prosecution. Oh, what do you think about Donald Trump's, prosecution? Oh, clearly. Oh, okay. So you just happen to align with every single, and they're like, well, no, I think that like gay rights are important. It's like, okay.
Steve Rubin. Matt, I'll let you move us along, but I'll just also say that there was a.
Grasser says, wait, I didn't know you were a man. I'm out of here.
A guy, I think it was you talked to him as well, Stephen, that like said he wasn't MAGA, but he had the Trump like limited edition shoe in the background. Like,
Jesse on fire.
You buy. So I'm not MAGA, I just bought the Trump shoes. It's just a decoration. So
no, you're wrong. Conservative liberalism says Genghis Khan wasn't manly. If you use JBP's definition, people who fought the monster were men. Sure, but that's exclusively Christian biblical masculinity. Nobody's going to deny that Achilles or Hercules or Hector or Genghis Khan or Julius Caesar or I'm trying to think of other people, Alexander the Great. They are not biblically masculine. They are not masculine in a Hebrew sense or a Christian sense or a Jewish sense. They're not masculine in a biblical sense, but they are absolutely masculine for the old world, 100%.
Yeah. So Matt, what have you got? What's next?
All right, moving along. Let's see if you guys notice this one. Now,
this one's probably going to hurt me, isn't it?
I realized after I wrote it that it's actually a variant of nut picking. So I'm going to call it unicorn picking because it's a more extreme version of nut picking. Nut picking, of course, is when you...
I'm going to go ahead and write this down, and I'm also going to write down the definition. Faux centrist heterodoxy, all centrists broke right except for Connor. And then what was this? Unicorn picking? I can guess at the definition, but I'm just going to let them go for it.
Find an extreme position that is held by a very minuscule number of people. You fasten on that because it's an easy object to attack. Unicorn picking is when you invent a position that isn't held by anyone.
Reckless. Yeah, thanks for giving me a place to say all the things and being a good sport about it, even when you disagree, Connor. Appreciate it. Yeah, honestly, you can say crazy shit in my chat. I will freak out on you, and I will yell at you, and I might call your perspective dumb, but as long as you're actually engaging in the concepts rather than just like random insults, then you are more than welcome in this space.
So you can slam dunk it. And I looked at Twitter and I saw a tweet from Eric Weinstein, one of our favorites, who did this perfectly. He said, and let me say, this is about the fires in
Sorry. Fernandez Souza says heterodoxy is cringe, homodoxy is the way to go. I'm a homodox centrist.
in California. Let me say that Los Angeles is every bit as worthy of saving and celebrating as Kiev. I've been to both. I don't know who decided we are supposed to mourn other cities and other nations before our own. For better or worse, this is home. Glory to the city. Let's fight back. There's nobody, no American is saying, let's just worry about Kiev. Who gives a shit about Los Angeles? That's not a position I've ever heard. But Eric has very bravely, beaten this imaginary unicorn into the dust. So have you seen that?
What does that mean? I don't know if I should say. I don't know if I should say.
So I have one.
Hold on. Weirdly enough, I think I'm again the unicorn or whatever. Okay, so he's saying like we shouldn't give a shit about Los Angeles. We should only give a shit about Kyiv. I don't think the indictment is that anybody is going to explicitly say that we shouldn't care about the homelessness or crime of LA. I think they're going to say that Democrats are so bleeding heart, hug a thug, wanting to throw money at every single problem that there is no money with which you will be able to buy out the problems of LA. And so as a result, you're effectively prioritizing foreign entanglements over domestic issues because you don't have the complex thinking or budget sufficient to deal with domestic issues. That's the steal, man. Now, Eric could have just said something incredibly stupid, and that's entirely possible. Paul says, I have to say, as an Eastern European watching online American politics starting from around 2017 till today has been quite the ride. Yeah, it's a fucking roller coaster.
I call this the clown mirror, and this is where every single time.
Oh, that was it. That was it. You just make up, making up a shitty opposing perspective that doesn't exist. Clown mirror. Okay. Kind of jumped pretty quick.
Arguing with an opponent or an adversary or an interlocutor or a conversational part, whatever you call them. Every single time you're having an argument.
Gen X says, who is biblically masculine? Well, Jesus is. So is David. Even though David ends up being a piece of shit later in life. When he's a kid, he's actually a good dude. Tough enough to fight predators, resourceful enough to survive, capable of nurturing and defending the vulnerable. And the reason why JBP was talking about this was because the archetype of Jesus and the archetype of David and Moses is that of the shepherd. So tough enough to fight off predators, resourceful enough to survive the wild, capable of nurturing and defending the vulnerable. That is biblical masculinity. And I would say that Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Achilles, all that kind of stuff, they would be these first two, but they're not the third. And I think the third is injected through the archetype of the shepherd. Let's figure out what clown mirror is.
They can never summarize your position. And conversely, you have.
Oh, I hate that one. I hate that one. They can never summarize your position. When somebody acts confused as to what I'm saying, but I've already explained it 5 times and it's actually a really simplistic concept, that pisses me off to no end. The opposing view. And at sometimes it looks just like being obtuse. This is actually where Pisco pisses me off a little bit. I'm not saying Pisco is unintelligent. As a matter of fact, Pisco is super intelligent, which is why it pisses me off even more. He just acts like he's fundamentally correct. And when you ask him to steelman your position, he's done it before. He has steelman me before. So I'm not saying he does it all the time. But sometimes he'll act like what I'm saying is so crazy that he can't even steelman it. And I find that pretty bad faith. And I'm not using bad faith as a like cringe pearl clutchy thing. I'm saying like, I know he can steelman it. I know he understands what I'm saying. He's pretending to not understand what I'm saying because he's being obtuse on purpose.
Every time you summarize their position, it's never correct because they're worried that you're trapping them. So you might say something along the lines of like, I think that there are issues with the peer review process and the way that money funds research. Okay. And then when they're in the middle of constructing their argument, it's like, okay, well, so yeah, psychology in sociology.
Sorry, quick shill just because we're still in the 200s. Like the stream, it's free. Move your little cursor over there, click the like button, and or move your little thumb over on your mobile device and click the like button. It's free and it helps us in the algorithm. Number 2, search Valor Media Network on your device. Go into the search bar of YouTube, type in VALOR, Media Common Spelling, Network Common Spelling. Type that in and enter it. I am live 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And Tuesdays, I'm live on my home channel, but the rest of the week, I'm home on Valor Media Network. I've had more than 200 people in my chat consistently since I started streaming today. I expect to see all 200 of you there tomorrow. Super chats if you got them. Memberships if you got them. If you don't, I love you anyways.
These are all bunk sciences, and you even agreed earlier that all of it is fucked anyway. And every single time they summarize a position that you've given, they're like, no, hold on, I didn't say that. I gave this position. They can never.
Sorry, I gotta tell Proto Bro. I gotta tell him to fuck off real quick. I will defend my wife and kids to the death. Yes, while I promote. If you don't understand, I can't promote Steven. I'm infinitely smaller than Steven. And befriend this gross thing that you're saying, consent violating, whose Nazi son is addicted to Adderall. Yeah, I hope Steven stops engaging in antisocial behavior and he starts engaging in more pro-social behavior. And I'm going to encourage him to do that. So you caught me there, Proto Bro. That last one is repulsive, so I'm not going to read it. But yeah, I think that's bad behavior and you shouldn't do that. Gross.
Cite your position accurately. It's always like they're looking into a fucking clown mirror. And then on the flip side, whenever you try to recite their position to them, and I'll always do this before I attack a position because somebody will give a thing, I'm like, hold on. Okay. So they'll say something like dads are horrible. I fucking hate dads and we got to do something. They're killing our children. We got to get these dads out of the homes. And I'll say something like, okay, just so I can understand. So you're saying that we need to remove all fathers from homes? Is that what you're saying? And
Douglas Stone says, my 10-year-old just got into 40K and I've spent the last month painting minis and listening to lore on YouTube. Thanks for the videos on your other channel. I live to serve, Douglas Stone. Thank you for the comment.
Anytime this is like a defense mechanism that when I see people activate it over and over again, I think that this person is not operating in good faith. People are very afraid of having you restate their arguments because the emotional feeling they get is, oh, fuck. If he can restate my argument, he's got a knockdown. Fuck me. So every time that somebody freaks out when you assess their argument accurately, I view that person as pusillanimous. You try to restate the argument, you go, okay, so you're saying dad should be removed from the household. Now they begin to endlessly hedge and evolve or mutate is maybe a better, they're like, well, I don't know about all dads.
Gen X says, take away corporate welfare and use it for citizens. Boom, problem solved. No, fuck that. We should subsidize food and we should subsidize oil. You know why? Because it's necessary for modern society in order to thrive. So if we spend a few $1 billion a year in order for it to function, then I don't give a shit. Let's take a look. Sorry for being so profane today, but I'm on my home channel, so I'm feeling a little bit more comfy than usual, so I'm getting very profane. How much money is spent on food subsidies in the U.S. every year? $166 billion. This is, what do we have? Like a $6 trillion budget. So calculator. And on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is 1/3 of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. 166, 000, 000, 000, divide by 6, 000, 000, 000. That's million, billion, trillion, is 3% of the budget. I am perfectly fine spending 3% of the budget to make sure that we have guaranteed cheap food in the United States every year. How much is oil subsidized in the US per year? $20 billion a year. Shut the fudge up. In the US, fossil fuel subsidies, including those for oil, are estimated to be around $20 billion per year in direct subsidies. However, when included in indirect subsidies like tax breaks and other incentives, that total can be much higher. Some estimate, including those from the International Monetary Fund, put the figure as high as $757 billion, which, by the way, is bullshit. Some tax subsidies is buying new equipment. I don't consider that a subsidy. So direct subsidies is $20 billion per year. That's piss in the ocean. I can already tell you $6 billion a year was $18 per citizen and $36 per taxpayer. So that is $100 per taxpayer per year to make sure that we have guaranteed cheap energy in the country. Fuck that. Bad policy, Gen X. Bad policy. You should care about that as somebody who spends your time in state legislation. Although, obviously, we should subsidize other things and we should do nuclear and renewables. LB says, Connor, LA isn't all that bad. Have you ever been to Cali? I love Cali. Do you knock it till you try? I love San Diego. I think California is one of the most physically beautiful places on the planet. I just hate the politics and I hate the gun laws. All right. Anyways, nothing more cringe than Destiny supporters talking about masculinity. I'm more masculine than you, pussy. Well, put up your stats, bro. What first responder service have you served in? What sports did you play in high school? What military service did you serve in? You got a fucking sweet ghost Call of Duty mask. Is your level of masculinity smoking pot and picking fucking lint out of your belly button while you play Call of Duty, you fucking loser? Coming in my chat to talk shit? Fuck you. How about that? How about you tell me who you are? You already know who I am. Hey, wait, Caesar forgave his enemies, though? No, he didn't. He fucking crucified them. What are you talking about? Julius Caesar, as a teenager, was kidnapped by pirates. And then when he was like, hey, you know, I'm going to help you negotiate for my ransom, but when you let me go, I'm going to come back and kill you. And they were like, oh, that's funny. And then he came back and he fucking crucified them. So Newman Star says the correct answer is Samson. Wrong. He didn't nurture the vulnerable. Anyways.
Like maybe trans dads or like Chinese fathers or like dads from like the 1800s. Like, okay, wait, so are you saying like modern dads shouldn't be?
Samson is just Jewish Hercules.
You're like, no matter what you do in this argument, you will never be able to restate their position because they're afraid that if you restate it, you'll be able to knock it down. And they'll never be able to accurately restate yours, you know?
Well, speaking for Chris as well, we recognize this. So if someone's talking to Jordan Peterson or Weinstein or any of these people, and they're always talking with friends.
Proto Bro says, worse, you watch Destiny for your moral compass. Wrong. He's watching me for his moral compass, and we're watching Destiny because he makes insightful lines of argumentation to contend with.
Right? They're not having a debate like you're like you're having, right? They're
based Fernando Souza. Based.
Talking with a friend, it's a very softball type of discussion, and they'll expound this kind of thing. And then their interlocutor wants to basically yes and them, right? So if they do kind of summarize their position, give a shorter version of it just so they can sort of jump off there, it's never accurate. No, it's always much more complicated than that. It's always much more nuanced, much more sophisticated. So yeah, that.
Gen X says paying a company that profits hundreds of millions of dollars a day taxpayer money is dumb. No, it's not, because a lot of the fucking money involved in oil production is wrapped up in physical fucking assets that aren't guaranteed to pay off. Drilling is expensive. Going out into the Arctic is expensive. Running fracking is expensive. You want it to be guaranteed. The same way that you could say, oh, well, food companies make a profit, so why are we subsidizing them at all? We're subsidizing them because they don't always make a profit. And you have to make sure that that industry is subsidized and functional. That way, when there's bad weather, then we still have food. And when there's bad weather or bad geopolitical climate, we still have oil. So wrong. If we subsidize smaller producers, sure, I don't give a shit. How does Tesla subsidies help you? It makes electric vehicles cheaper. Captain Nemo says tax breaks or subsidies. According to that Google search, I don't agree with that, though. Yeah, I hate this.
This is the thing. So I guess my point is,
now, how much did they ask pay in taxes? I don't give a shit about this question because so I think that there should be a minimum tax liability. So you should have like a minimum 10% tax liability, okay? But when it comes to companies, when they don't make money, when they don't profit, corporate taxes are based off of profit. So if you lose money, you have a 0% tax liability. Additionally, if you reinvest in your company, then those are tax write-offs. So if you buy more drilling equipment, if you hire more people, if you do exploratory leases, if you do this, if you do that, all of that is a write-off because you're growing your company, which is ultimately good for the economy. So I don't care about this line of questioning. Although I do think if you make a profit, you should have like a minimum 10% tax liability.
It serves not only as a good debating strategy where you can protect yourself from potential criticisms, but I guess they just love the intricacy and the complexity. Like it's like the things they're saying, the thoughts they're having are like fractals that just grow in real time.
You always ask them, bullshit. It's more, try me. People are like, oh, it's really complicated. Okay, we're on a 4-hour show, so why don't we?
Andy B says played football, served 9 years combat engineer, was an assistant first responder in high school. See, Andy B's a fucking man.
expand on this idea instead of feeling like we have to cover 400 fucking topics. How about we get like in depth on one thing? What do you mean it's too complicated to explain? Tell me what the fuck you mean when you say, what was this last thing I saw from Peterson that like, what's the worst fire? Yeah, like the worst fire in your life is a dragon or something. Or what the fuck am I thinking? Or like fire is like an enemy. Or what?
Yeah, fire's a predator.
What's the category of predator? Bear, eagle, if you're a primate.
Oh, fuck you. Now I have to rewind it and watch this shit because I was talking to chat too much.
Complicated to explain. Tell me what the fuck you mean when you say, what was this last thing I saw from Peterson that like, what's the worst fire? Yeah, like the worst fire in your life is a dragon or something. Or what the fuck am I thinking? Or like fire is like an enemy. Or what?
Yeah. He's talking about in a mythological sense that natural events can seem predatory. It's actually I hate this hyper-literalism and hyper-rationalism. These people, in my opinion, I know people use like the fucking the bug man thing, but these people gleefully misunderstanding mythological language is so fucking cringe to me. I will say this to Steven for sure, where he's like, a fire is actually a dragon. And it's like, bitch, if you fucking listen for 30 seconds to Jordan Peterson, he actually explains the concept, which is effectively a dragon is the archetype of a predator. Whenever you see a dragon in any media whatsoever, what the media is trying to convey to you is the peak of predation. That's actually why I don't like How to Train Your Dragon, because it's talking about domesticating the peak of predation. But the point is, it's reptilian, which can be land-based and water-based. It flies, so that's air-based, and it breathes fire, which is one of the most ancient threats to mankind. And so a dragon, an archetypical mythological dragon, is the embodiment of threat. That's the entire concept. So watching these fucking nerds go, fire is a predator. It's like mythologically dumbass. If you were a fucking caveman and you saw a forest fire coming at you, you might personalize it through mythological thinking. I missed the point. Fuck you.
Yeah, fire's a predator.
Dude, fuck this guy. He's like, in biology, predator means that it's conscious, so I don't understand mythological thinking. Fuck you. You're an idiot.
What?
You're being obtuse, dumbass.
What's the category of predator? Bear, eagle, if you're a primate. Fire? Is fire a predator?
No.
Well, it's
in a modern connotation, but mythologically, obviously. God, I hate these people. They're so smug.
complicated because a fire kills you.
To be fair.
Truzal says, wait, am I allowed to talk shit directly to / about Connor if my man card has more accolades? You're cruising dangerous waters, Connor? Yeah, tell me your man accolades. I want to know them.
I didn't even watch this whole clip, so maybe he does say something profound. No. But in the bit that I watched, it sounded like he was just trying to make a more general thing about things that do bad things. I was like, okay, well, that's fine, then I get that. But then we're not even saying anything fucking profound at this point. This is just stupid, okay? Yeah, I hate it. It's such a lazy, annoying thing. Yeah.
There's this group of people, they're kind of Peterson orbiters for the most part, called, they don't refer to themselves as this. We refer to them as they're the sense makers, right?
Melody says, at Connor heading out was fun. I have a request. Just see Signal versus the Serfs might be worth adding to the docket. I think I saw, it might have been you earlier, but you were talking about like gender or something, Serfs versus on gender dysphoria. I don't know if that's Jesse Signal, but I'll go ahead, or Signal. I'll go ahead and put Jesse Signal in parentheses, just in case it's a different debate. But I did see the comments earlier saying Serfs versus gender dysphoria. I know you guys aren't going to be looking at screen the entire time, but I'm actually, what I'm doing right now is I'm scrolling through chat and I'm highlighting what you're saying. And I'm kind of like laughing about it as I'm 3/4 listening to the content. I should be giving the content my undivided appeal, but I'm trying to be ADD like everybody else with mixed results.
Where they really like these kind of like 4-hour podcasts where they discuss honor and beauty and the logic of Plato or whatever, but like it's all like kind of indulgent waffle.
I hate this. Shut up. I'm an indulgent waffler in the archetypes and pagan concepts of classical mythological thought. Shock Doctor says, Counterpoints, make it something like the Swedes do. Sovereign public wealth funds that take from the profits and apply those monetary benefits where we need them. Sure. If there's a better way to do it, I'm down for a better way to do it.
There's some stuff in it that's incredible, but they came up with this rule in one of their conversations, and it's something that has like been around in Game B. That's another.
LB says, why? Small businesses pay 30%. Why shouldn't corporations pay 36%? Small businesses have the same tax write-offs as everybody else, LB.
Another thing that they talk about Game B, but it was called the Omega Rule, or the Omega Principle.
So it's called Rule Omega. If I am operating under Rule Omega, then you recognize that I am the kind of being that is endeavoring to grasp really deep, difficult, distant, nuanced things. And by definition, when I'm expressing them to you, they're going to be very hard to understand.
On the face of it, it seems like a reasonable thing because it sounds like what you're asking that people do. So they say like, what you should always be looking for is when you listen to the.
Corwin Shelway says, come on, cartoon dragons are not the same as concept dragons. Yes, they are. They're appealing to the same level of archetypical threat. So you can say like How to Train Your Dragon is still sick because they're creating a mythological, biological creature that they can master and tame. But I'm telling you, there's something going on in mass media where dragons were understood to be the pinnacle of threat for a really long time. And what's happened is they've all been co-opted and tamed. If you look at mass media within the past 20 years, the only example I can think of is like Smaug, and from Lord of the Rings, Smaug, whatever his name is, and then Reign of Fire. And I actually love Reign of Fire. If you haven't seen Reign of Fire, it's so dope. It's like militia and U.S. military fighting actual dragons in post-apocalyptic Britain, where the United Kingdom has been destroyed by an outbreak of dragons. And it has Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey. It's so dope. It's actually like a really fantastic, corny movie. I love it. Gen X says, okay, Connor, he's going live right now. Call in and tell him. No, I'll do that later. I'm at like 5 hours. I'll do it in person. It's better for being in person. Steve might be beyond giving JBP the benefit of the doubt. Sure. Gnarly cool. That's what makes How to Train a Dragon so fucking sick, though. Jesus. Okay, sure. But I don't like the co-opting of threat. I still think we need media that expresses threat. All right. Then he should explain it like you did, says Fernanda Souza. Well, I know it because he explained it to me once. Yep. I love Peterson. Deal with it. All right, we're going to watch like 5 more minutes and then we're going to wrap up. Matter of fact, I need to tell Destiny to open up his raid to me so I can raid into him at like 2. I'm not going to do that all the time because sometimes I might go to I might go later, but you know, if I'm wrapping up anyways.
Other person's argument is you shouldn't try to tear it down. You should try to look for the nuggets. So even if it's 90% wrong, find the 10% that is correct and kind of build on that, right? So one, that's a terrible heuristic to apply, even if you apply it correctly, right? Because people can just say dumb shit and you kind of say, yeah, well, that's basically right if you take it like this. But the other thing is like, it's essentially asking like for ultimate charity, right? Like as much charity as possible. And you'll hear them invoke about how they're able to have these conversations with people that disagree. And this is, you know, because they're open-minded and whatnot. But that principle is never extended to anybody with strong disagreement. So like you, if you're in those conversations, it's not like Peterson in the debate with you was exercising the Omega rule, right? And then afterwards, when he talked about the conversation with you, he was like, well, he had the spirit of confrontation and he just wants to be right. And like, if you see Peterson in that discussion, he's very much argumentative, right? Like he's animated about his point, but you're pushing back means that you're not a good faith person. You're just trying to score points. And it's that thing where there are actually relatively innocuous scholars who interact with Peterson. I'm not talking about people that just want, you know, like a big audience, but like kind of as orbiters. And they kind of whitewash him because they don't do what you do or didn't, which was point out, here's the, you know, but are you endorsing these conspiracy theories? Like, do you believe this and that kind of thing? They just studiously avoid those topics and then like spend, you know, an hour and a half talking about like his interpretation of Jungian psychology. But
because that's the most interesting shit. Go on.
But he's constantly linking it, you know, to culture war stuff, but there's no pushback. So they can say,
okay, as an example, Luciferian, okay? Jordan Peterson called, and I'm going to leave it here content wise, just because I typically run 2.5 hours. I had a good day. I had fun. I hope you had a good day. I hope you had fun. And let's go ahead and address that. Luciferian. A lot of people were alarmed by Jordan Peterson using the term Luciferian intellect in order to describe Stephen. However, Luciferian in the way that Jordan Peterson uses it it's not necessary. It is derogatory in a way, but it's also about the worship of one's own intellect. And I think Stephen worships his own intellect. Okay. And problem, right? Like I believe that shit. So, you can say like, oh, well, he's dismissing him and he's being rude and he's being passive aggressive and all that kind of shit. And it's like, yeah, but he's also descriptively, in my opinion, being true. I think that when you don't believe in God, you will find something in order to fill that void. And I played a clip in my, I don't know if you guys watched it, but I played a clip from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where the character Dennis tries to fill his God hole with women. And I think Stephen, no offense to him, I'm his friend. He tried to fill that with women and sex and his own intellect. So is what it is. JS says, what was JP's broader point in calling fire a predator? Fire is a predator, therefore ? Because if I disagree with that, then JP is pointlessly conflating stuff. He's talking about in a mythological sense. So you can blame Jordan Peterson for trying to talk about mythology to a biologist, but I also feel like these haughty anti-theists should also stop being obtuse. They know what he's saying. They're choosing to be obtuse. Like the stream if you haven't done so already. Super chats if you got it. Memberships if you got it. Type in Valor Media Network into your search bar. VALOR Media, common spelling, network, common spelling. Subscribe over there. I am live 5 days a week, 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And I should see 200 of you there. We broke 200 almost all day today, so I expect all 200 of you to show up tomorrow morning.